Call the meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Chairman Baugh,
Here.
Vice Chairman Dibble,
Here.
Commissioner Schrader,
Present.
Commissioner Zarguni,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner York,
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner Mandel is absent, and Commissioner Salazar Garza. Here. Quorum established.
Thank you. At this time, we will open the public comment portion for general comments. If you have a comment that is specific to a line item, we will wait to hear that comment until that line item is presented. So are there any comments right now that are general public comments? Seeing none, Andrew, do you have anything that you are holding that needs to be a public comment at this time?
No, sir. I anticipated one general public comment, but do not believe the person's in the audience.
Thank you. At this time, we will close the general public comment and move on to approval of absences.
Make a motion, we approve the absences.
A motion, do I have a second?
I second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. On to approval of minutes. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion. I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. On to the briefing, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commission. I'm Neiman Young, the Assistant City Manager, or one of the Assistant City Managers, and today I'll be giving a presentation on some proposed changes that we're making to the Community Enrichment Fund, and I'm waiting for IT to load our presentation. Is it? Okay, all right. Can you all see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so City Council had requested, probably 5 or 6 months ago at least, as long as my tenure and our interim director of Parks and Recreation's tenure, for us to take a deep dive into the Community Enrichment Fund. They want to know exactly what is the Community Enrichment Fund, how does our park development fees process work, and perhaps make some recommendations to make it more transparent and more accountable for not only council and city staff, but for the general public as a whole. So we put together a work team to look into the Community Enrichment Fund process. That team was comprised of representatives from the executive leadership team for the city finance department, city budgeting office, legal, DSD, Parks and Recreation, and the strategic office of innovation. We started doing this deep dive into the UDC to actually detail exactly how the Community Enrichment Fund works. And we discovered that, A, it's a pretty complex system, number one, but there's also flaws that we identified in the system that we feel we need to make recommendations to both the Planning Commission and City Council to approve to make this a much more transparent and simplified process so we can keep track of revenue that's coming into the fund and, more importantly, revenue that's, or expenditures that's going outside of that fund. So please bear with me because I know that I'm going to basically rehash some subjects that you are already familiar and aware of since we're discussing UDC, but I do understand that we do have a general public audience that's probably not familiar with the UDC, so I'm going to have to rehash briefly some portions of the UDC just to bring the general public and audience up to speed on where we currently stand in the process. So during our research, we discovered that the point of the Community Enrichment Fund is to develop open space. Open space being defined as trying to ensure that we keep recreational areas for our citizens and community where they live and play, while at the same time trying to accommodate the escalating development of residential and commercial structures throughout the community. Well, we discovered that the city gains open space by two different approaches. Number one, we asked a developer that's coming to do a development project in the city to dedicate land for park space or pay a fee in lieu of that land dedication. And then once that's settled, they then had to take approach number two. They had to pay a park fee or make park development improvements. And those park development improvements, as we understand, is within the new park space that's being dedicated to the city or within established parks throughout the community. So let me briefly take you all through the first side of the equation, which is the land dedication or fee in lieu of land, which we call FILO. According to the UDC, whenever a plat is filed, the developer has a option to either dedicate land or pay a fee in lieu of land. If that developer is going to pursue land dedication, they are required to dedicate 1 acre of open space for every 100 homes that are planned to be built. If that developer does not want to or is not able to do that land dedication, then they can pay a FILO, or fee in lieu of land. And the formula for that fee is calculated as A times V equals M, which is the amount of land required for dedication, the fair market value per acre for the property equals the amount of dollars that's is owed by the developer. Just to simplify this process for the general audience, we graphically depicted this fee in the example before you. We decided that we was going to take 100 dwelling units as an example and walk through the A times V equals M formula. If you can see, we have 1 acre for 100 dwelling units, 1 acre is required for that land dedication. If they decided that they was going to pursue the FILO, they would pay 1 acre times $62,500, which is the max market value that the city can impose upon an acre of land according to the UDC, which will bring it to a total of $62,500. Naturally, if a developer was to come into the DSD office and provide proof that they purchased the land for a significantly lower price, then we take that as the market value and plug that number into the equation. Going forward, it's important that the general audience understand that these funds are restricted according to the UDC. According to the UDC, FILO fees that are paid into the Community Enrichment Fund can only be, number one, invested in park space, and it can only be invested in park space within, in a park or regional park that's most likely to serve the residents of that contributing development. And the restriction comes in the fact that in no case can those funds be expended on any park more than 5 miles outside of the contributing development. So in addition to the $62,500 that's paid in the FILO, we then have what's called the park development fee that's paid. The park development fee is charged as $200 per 100 dwelling units. $200 per dwelling unit. So you can see in this example, we have $62,500 that's in the FILO, and then we have an additional $20,000 was created by $200 time 100 dwelling units, coming to a total of $82,500 that would be owed in fees for a developer that wanted to pursue a 100 dwelling unit project in the city. So $82,500 in fees may seem steep, but to provide that number of context, the Parks and Recreation Department put together a summary budget defining the cost of developing a 1 acre park with just basic amenities come to recreational areas across the city. As you can see, that came to a total of $1,600 to $14,925. Now, if you recall, the city is currently receiving fees to the tune of $82,500. Now, we're not asking for the development community to fully fund parks across the city, but we believe that the intent of the Community Enrichment Fund and UDC is to pay a fair share towards the open space. However, the staff questions if this share is fair, because currently we're running at a deficit of $531,525. So we decided that we was going to start those communications with the development community, which we have through the Coastal Bend Builders Association, to make a determination on what does fair look like and how do we close that deficit. And we got a couple of ideas that we want to bring forward to you all tonight. So when all the smoke clears, the revenue that's generated from the FILO and the park development fee is placed inside a fund, which is called the Community Enrichment Fund. Again, according to the UDCDs, there are restrictions to leveraging expenditures against this fund to include limiting FILO expenditures to a 5-mile radius near the contributing development. There has been some contention between or some confusion, across the community regarding expenditures against this fund, because according to the UDC, the city has 7 years to expend those funds. If those funds aren't expended within 7 years on a park project, then a refund is owed. There was a misperception in the community that the refund would be owed to the developer that paid that fee. But according to the UDC, that's not the case. what the UDC states that if a refund is pursued, that refund is owed to the property owner at the time of that 7-year deadline period. An example, the homeowner. So to give an example, like say a large development like Rancho Vista with 770 homes, we'd be looking at taking fees that were paid for, into the community enrichment fund. If it was refunded, you'd basically be paying out 1/770th of the fees to each individual homeowner, which basically is a piecemeal approach to addressing open space across the city. So naturally that's concerning, and we've been tasked by city management and city council to figure out how to get this community enrichment fund process under control and figure out how we can properly leverage those dollars across the community. So that brings us to the first flaw that we found in the community enrichment fund process. If you review the community enrichment fund itself, you notice that there's budget line items for each development that's contributed to the fund. When I say that the budget line item that's created is unique to that contributing development. For example, if Flower Mound Estates decided that they wanted to pay community enrichment or FILO fees, finance would go in, finance would create a budget line item that you would think says Flower Mound Estates LLC, and here's the funds. That seems like that'd be a great way to account for revenue coming in and revenue going out. And it was great until development started escalating. And as development escalated, so did budget line items. So we had discovered that at last count through our research, there was no less than 165 budget line items in the community enrichment fund. Currently, the audit office is looking at the community enrichment fund after we gave up on trying to untangle expenditures coming in and going out, and they've discovered no less than 191 budget line items. So naturally, as you can imagine, it makes it exceptionally difficult to track revenue expenditures for so many budget line items, number one. It makes it even more challenging to assure that expenditures that are leaving out that fund are in compliance with the restrictions that are annotated in the UDC. And another thing that we had discovered was that the budget line items have ballooned so much that new budget line items stopped being created in 2017. However, development continued, fees continued to be paid. So what was happening was fees were being paid and they were being placed in those legacy budget line items. So funds were becoming intermingled, and now I feel bad for the auditing office because they're really going to have to try to figure out, okay, what funds is what, how do we untangle these intermingled funds and figure out what's being contributed and where these monies are supposed to be spent. Again, as stated before, there is that 5-mile restriction that's contained in the UDC. And from discussions that I've had throughout the community, I think that there's a lot of us in the community that are really wrapped around the axle regarding the UDC's 5-mile restriction. So to give that restriction some context, the staff and I decided that we were going to utilize our GIS system to place a point on a map. And around that point on the map, we decided that it was going to draw a 5-mile circle, 5-mile radius, just so we could see what does that look like, on the city. We were surprised to learn that much of the city is covered by just one budget line item. And so we decided, okay, scratching ahead, that's just one budget line item that's before you. Let's see what happens when we attempt to try to depict 165 budget line items, on a map for the city. You see we had one development, which is 0.5% of the 165 budget line items in the Community Enrichment Fund. Here are 8 developments, or just 1% of the 165 budget line items in the Community Enrichment Fund. Here are 16 developments, or just 10% of the 165 budget line items in the Community Enrichment Fund. And here is 32 developments, or just 20% of the 165 budget line items that are in the Community Enrichment Fund. Now, if it's hard for us to track this on a map, imagine the financial nightmare or the accounting nightmare that staff has to go through just trying to keep up with not only 20% of those budget line items, but all 100%. So you may ask, so what was our takeaway from this demonstration? The staff was quickly able to determine that attempting to manage over 165 budget line items is inefficient, if not impossible. Number two, with so much development in our community, the city is littered with these 5-mile areas, thus leading to redundancy and overlap. And number three, the 5-mile restriction is not effectively achieving the original intent of keeping the development fee revenue in the areas where the development is occurring. So to address this issue, we decided the staff would like to recommend that we take action to simplify the 5-mile restriction. This can easily be accomplished by tracking fees via area development zones versus individual developments. Area development zones are adopted by council and are recognized by both the city and the development community. As you know, by the 5-mile areas that we laid across the zones as depicted by the circles, it's reasonable to accept our belief that the zones are in keeping with the intent of the 5-mile restriction. Use of the area development zones will address overlaps and ensure that park fees remain in the region for each development. And most importantly, the use of area development zones will allow for us to reduce the budget line items from 165 down to just 9, which will make it much more easier to ensure that we're tracking revenue coming in, expenditures going out, and ensuring that we're in compliance with the UDC. So we do have some recommendations that we took to council and we'll be bringing to you all as well, where we're going to, we're making recommendations to council to update our financial policy that requires that the city manager present an annual community enrichment fund budget along with the operating budget and the CIP annually. That budget will be driven by our capital budget needs, improvements in established parkland, priorities that's been established by the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and emerging priorities. We believe that this process is proper because now it will allow for city council oversight. It'll allow for feedback from the development community who's actually paying these fees, and most importantly, we'll be able to shop this budget around town halls with the other two, with the operating budget and CIP budget, allowing for us to ensure that there's transparency and we're gaining feedback from our citizens across the community. So that's the first part, just improving the process itself. It then takes us to the second part of the presentation where we're going to be coming back to the Planning Commission and to Council to, number one, do some amendments to the UDC, which will include language amendments and amendments in the fees that's captured in the UDC. So you may be asking, well, why amend the Community Enrichment Fund or the UDC itself? Well, park dedication requirements have not been updated in the UDC since 2013, and number one, and park development fees have not been updated since the creation of the Community Enrichment Fund portion of the ordinance, which was written in 2007. So we decided, hey, let's take a look around and see, let's talk to some subject matter experts, you know, about how park development fees, or what are the best practices for establishing park development fees, number one. Then number two, get a good understanding of what our peer cities are doing across the state of Texas. So we pulled a study from John L. Crompton, who is a subject matter expert for recreational fees and structuring recreational ordinances across the state of Texas. And after reading that study, we came to quickly learn that there is no cookie cutter process for how cities across the state of Texas are gaining fees to create more open space. Some cities charge a park development fee, some don't. Some charge a FILO, some don't. Some just charge a flat rate. So we tried our best to compare apples to apples and put together some recommendations that we thought that would be fair and in keeping with the best practices across the top 8 cities in the state of Texas. So again, we're going to talk about 2 portions. Number one, the first approach, which is the land dedication or FILO. Currently, this is where we stand when you look at totals, regardless of how a community is charging fees for open space, whether they're charging a FILO or a park development fee or a combination of both. This is the totals on what they gain for a 100 dwelling unit across the state of Texas. As you can see, Houston gets $70,000 worth of fees for a 100 dwelling unit property. Fort Worth, $78,975, and then Corpus Christi, $82,500, placing us in the bottom third of the top 8 cities that are of the top 8 cities in the state of Texas for open space fees and park development. So we decided that we was going to try to take a current level of service that our parks and open space is offering citizens in our community. This was gained by first taking the Corpus Christi's population of 326,000 and dividing it by the amount of parkland acres that we currently have in our inventory for the city of Corpus Christi. Quick, simple math, we was able to determine that there's 156 people per park acre, which is a quantifiable standard that's been laid out by the Crompton study. So with 156 people per acre divided by 2.7 people per household, that brings us to a total of 57 dwelling units. So what that's saying is, in order for us to keep the same landscape or the same open space that's offered to our citizens, we would need to reduce the land dedication from 1 unit per 100 dwelling units to 1 unit per 57 dwelling units. And that would get us closer to ensuring that as the city grows, we're still maintaining that same level of open space that our citizens enjoy today. We, as stated before, have been in discussions with the with the development community, and we still haven't come to terms on if 1 acre per 57 dwelling units is going to be where we land at. It is, it does require buy-in, and it is a process of negotiation. But if that was the case, we've been told by the development community, whatever number that we do land on, let's take a phased approach to putting that dedication and that fee in place. So if it was to be 1 acre per 57 dwelling units, this is what it would look like, where we request that the UDC be amended to require that 1 acre be dedicated per 86 dwelling units in 2023, then 1 acre per 71 dwelling units in 2024, then 1 acre per 57 dwelling units in 2025. So naturally, if we're asking for increased land dedication, that means that if they didn't want to dedicate the land, they'd pay a fee in lieu of land, and that means that that fee in lieu of land would increase. So we decided that it was going to depict what that increase looks like here in this graph before you. Basically, all told, that if we did move forward with an adoption of bringing land dedication down to 1 acre per 57 dwelling units, FELO fees would increase from $62,500 in a 100 dwelling unit project to $109,375 in a 100 dwelling unit project. It seems like this would be a significant surge in increases, but when you do the math and actually see how does that impact a dwelling unit for each house, taking those fees would basically raise the price of doing or building a home in Corpus Christi by $468.75 per house. So that's the FELO, and we'll quickly go through our recommendations for the park development fee itself. And rather than, making any drastic changes to the UDC or to that park development fee, all we're simply asking is that we include room for inflation, in the park development fee itself. So we won't find ourselves still charging fees in 2007 for 2021. Just like operating costs go up for the business community, operating costs go up for development and for the city itself. So we'll be bringing back to you all a recommendation to amend the UDC to include a CPI index consideration in fees annually. If we were to approve those numbers as presented, that would bring Corpus Christi from being in the lower third tier of fees that's charged in the state of Texas, or at least in the top 8 cities in the state of Texas. It'll bring us from the third to the median. And what we're trying to demonstrate here is that we're not seeking eye gouging or, opportunity or opportunism. Rather, we're just trying to bring the city, modernize the city, or at least modernize our Community Enrichment Fund ordinance, and bring us to the median where we think is the proper place for the city of Corpus Christi. This graph depicts what we would lose if we weren't going to move forward with modernizing our philo fee and our park development fee. And currently, it shows that for a 100-unit project, we'd be losing $133,688 over 5 years if we didn't move forward with the staff's recommendation. That equates to the cost of 6 swing sets, 11 shade structures with picnic tables, and 334 barbecue pits. That may seem like that's quite nominal, or maybe a strange way to put that comparison in place. But in our business, when you're walking around to parks and they're empty, unfurnished, like many of the parks along Ocean Drive, or like many of the parks in the community, and we don't have the money to install a barbecue pit, and we don't have the money to replace a playground, these numbers are significant. So to wrap this up, these are the recommendations that will be coming back to you all for consideration and adoption. That would include amending the UDC to rename the Community Enrichment Fund to the Park Development Fund, amending the UDC to dissolve the 5-mile radius requirement and restrict the use of fees in lieu of land to the city area development zones of the contributing residential development, amend the UDC to change land dedication requirements from 1 acre per 100 dwelling units to 1 acre per 57 dwelling units, increase the park development fee to remain in keeping with the consumer price index. We'll be going to council with a request to approve a proposed fiscal year 22 Community Enrichment Fund budget. And we'll be recommending to council to update the budget finance policy to require that the city manager present a proposed Community Enrichment Fund budget along with the operating budget and capital budget. A couple other considerations, and this is not all encompassing, but this is a couple considerations that we've gathered from the development community through this, multiple discussions that are ongoing. They will want us to also remove the language allowing for a refund of fees if not spent within 7 years, because they feel that that is a kind of like bait and switch or kind of misleading. So to alleviate any confusion about refunds could potentially go back to the developer, just remove the language. In addition, the development community would like to request that not only we restrict the philo funds, but restrict the park development funds, which at the moment, the funds, park development funds, or the $200 per household could be spent anywhere across the community. It doesn't have to be within 5 miles of the contributing development. We're having conversations with the staff, and we're not opposed to that, but naturally there's going to have to be some ongoing discussions on the impact of restricting those funds in addition to the philo funds. And finally, just a minor add, the development community would like to change the UDC to read for the Assistant City Manager of Parks and Recreation to determine the amount of the philo, and we'll be looking at putting some language in there regarding an appeals process. So again, this slide just summarizes the actions that we've taken to get us to where we're standing before you today. These were our proposed actions forward, but we believe that this timeline is going to slide to the right. As stated before, we're in discussions with the Coastal Bend Builders Association, and we want to make sure that we have buy-in. We want to make sure that all voices are heard and feedback is provided, especially from the community that is contributing the fees to this fund. So we're going to push this timeline to the right until we make sure that we have it right, and we do have that negotiated agreement with the development community. And then we'll be back before the Planning Commission with the request for a public hearing, and then a public hearing with the City Council so we can get the new policies adopted. I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you. At this time, are there any questions? Commissioner Miller.
Currently, what's the percentage of, I would imagine it's probably 100% of the developers that do the fee in lieu of versus land dedication, is that correct?
Yes, it's overwhelmingly fees paid in lieu of land versus the land dedication itself. I believe that the last land dedication was done in 2014, I believe, but
Yeah, the
Yeah,
last
okay.
land dedication was the London Unit 1, London Town Unit 1,
Okay.
yeah.
which
But
is
that's
a
what I-
little over an acre.
But
That's what I
prior,
figured.
but prior to that, because we had the Rancho Vista, and then we had London. But prior to that, Nina, wasn't it? It's been a long time since.
Yeah, it had been probably since 2015. It's mostly Philo as opposed to dedication.
And when calculating the 5-mile radius, is it from the center of the development or from any extremity?
It's from the boundary of the development.
Okay. All right, that's the only questions that I had right now.
Commissioner Dibble.
Just a couple of comments, and I will tell you, anytime I see a survey, I'm leery, because sometimes I think surveys can be a means to drive an end. I think we saw that in our landscaping ordinance, and I do have some concerns in the survey here, and I'm sure they're a professional firm, but when you look at the towns that you used as a baseline against Corpus Christi, I think probably every one of those was at least twice the size of Corpus. There was no towns that were smaller, no towns that were approximate in size. And so, as a member of the Planning Commission, I'd be interested to see how those numbers change when you look at towns that are closely aligned to Corpus's size, as well as what towns that are smaller and towns that are bigger. I mean, the reality is smaller towns can't have everything that Houston, Austin, and these other large metropolitan areas have. And so sometimes we may just have to do without because we can't afford it. I think the other flaw that I saw in the presentation is when you show data that shows that it costs whatever it was, $620,000 to do the development, and the developers are only paying a small percentage of that. No comparison's done to what the benefit the city's going to get for the property taxes on those 100 houses that are built over time. And the city has to pay their fair share of that because they're getting the ongoing tax revenue. And so I'd be interested to see in the analysis, what portion do you think the city's responsible to pay for? And, because they're getting the ongoing revenue. And I think that's been completely omitted from the analysis. And I just would be interested to see if you factor those things into the equation. Is it 57 acres or 57 units for 1 acre of property developed? I just think there's some fundamental flaws in the analysis that I'd like y'all to look at.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
My comments are going to be, I guess, more from a planning perspective versus what I'm going to call the spreadsheet perspective. Commissioner Dibble hit on a few things that I think where it's need to be reconsidered, maybe from the spreadsheet perspective. But one of the things that's really not considered in this is how this city is growing compared to other cities that are centrally located. They radiate, they grow out. You can sort of spread out parks more evenly, more uniformly. But some of the most dynamic planning that's going on in some of those other cities right now are developing green space out of flood-prone areas. Those are linear areas. They link areas together, neighborhoods together. They make these parks more dynamic. They allow people to get out and move between areas, between neighborhoods, between commercial areas, retail areas, and residential areas. They're much more dynamic than they are static. And I've always had a real issue with the model of a developer going in and creating a conventional subdivision and then just picking a spot and saying, here's your chunk of land for a park, because 9 times out of 10 those in this town are the ones that they don't get any amenities in it. Even if they do, people don't use them much because they're not planned. They're basically leftover land.
Yes, sir.
And so I am very encouraged to see that you all are looking to link this to the area development plans, because having just gone through the process for the west side area development plan, when you're dealing with a lot of, west side, like much of the city already developed, it's going back and how do we make these parks better? How do we find the areas that are used or being used well? How are people really using these parts of the city? But we don't have much of a plan or even have an idea of how much of that money that's in the enrichment fund could be in play in the west side. Now, I realize that's at a higher level that we're looking at that, but still I think it would go a long way when these are linked to these area development plans. So I am really applauding that. But back to since this city is growing in a very linear way, it's growing one direction. We're up against the bay on one side. We're up against other encumbrances in other areas. And so I think looking at things like developing a linear park along Oso Park, or along the Oso in some way, where these flood-prone areas can't do anything else, but making them hike and bike trails that link other parks, or other parts of the city that are unique to the city, that are geographically give themselves to potentially be park areas, I think could be incredibly valuable at very limited excess cost, as opposed to more of the spreadsheet approach of just sprinkling these around randomly. So I would like to see very much that our planning department engaged in that, and their involvement central to how we're selecting areas that are of best value.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner York.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, things I would like to see, or information I'd like to have when y'all come back and present for action. One, and I appreciate the presentation, by the way, very informative, easy to follow. And you went about the 100 units going down to 57 for single family, but I think there's also something in the UDC about multifamily. I think it's like 1 to 200. Didn't see anything about that, if that's going to change or how that might be addressed. So would like to see something on that. And then the other comment I want to make, something I would like to see, is you showed that slide of the top eight cities, and we're at the bottom third, but I noticed that, I think it was Fort Worth is below us currently. And, I've been there, I've lived there, they've got very nice parks. So I would like to know, what are they doing differently than our city? How are they making better parks with less money? Are they using, allocating funds from the general fund, using that? Are they public-private partnerships? It'd be nice to see, are there other options than just raising all these fees? So it's just something I'd like to see when y'all come back.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. York, I can address the multifamily. In the ordinance was attached to your agenda item, and it does show for multifamily the proposal of 1 acre for each 114 proposed dwelling units. So that would be, in contrast to the current 200.
Thank you.
And you're absolutely right, because it left me head scratching as well, because Houston, the largest city in the state, is below Corpus Christi and fees as well. And we really try to put a deep dive analysis and into, okay, what's the rhyme or reason behind this? And our biggest takeaway, I would suppose, maybe it's the fact that they have more development, so they don't have to charge as high. I don't know, but that's something that we'll continue to try to peel away at, to try to figure out the drivers between how they're charging the fees and it's less than the city of Corpus Christi.
Thank you. Thank you for your briefing.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Moving on to the consent agenda items. At this time, Mr. Demas, we're going to pull items 8 and 11 off the consent and move those to the public hearing portion. Are there any other items that any other commissioner would like to pull and have read separately? Seeing none, Mr. Demas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Andrew Demas with Development Services, reading in tonight's consent agenda. So we'll begin with, again, by pulling numbers 8 and 11, but starting with the rest. Under letter A, plats, we have item number 3, Via Hermosa PUD Phase 1, a final of 20.710 acres. Item number 4, Cabanis Acres, Block 8, Lot 7A, a final of 1.283 acres. Item number 5, Coolside Addition, Block 7, Lot 6R, a final replat of .16 acres. Item number 6, Laguna Vista Shores, Block 17, Lot 7R, a final replat of .23 acres. Item number 7, Farmers Row Subdivision, Block 1, Lots 2AB and 2D through 2I, a replat of 11.99 acres. That is the conclusion of the plat section. Staff recommends approval along with the Technical Review Committee that they find that it meets all requirements of the UDC and state law. Under zoning, starting with number 9, case number 1021-04, Dock 5. This is a request on South Alameda from the ON Neighborhood Office District to the CN1 Neighborhood Commercial District. Staff recommends approval. Item number 10, case number 1021-06, Walker Holdings and Development LLC. This is a request off of Interstate 69 from the RS6 Single Family 6 District to the RS 4.5 Single Family 4.5 District. Staff recommends approval, and that is the conclusion of the consent agenda. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff at this time? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing on those items. I'm sorry, I will consider public hearing at this time. So are there any comments for items? Let me get these numbers correct. Numbers 3 through 7, 9, or 10. Anyone wishing to speak? All right, if you will, approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. The podium to your left. Thank you. Thank you. If you could state your name and address for the record.
My name is Glenn Tiller. I live at 3202 Topeka Street. And I'm here to comment on the proposal to rezone the property line item 9 at 3202 South Alameda to turn it into a CN1 Neighborhood Commercial District. I just want to voice my disapproval of this choice. My understanding is there's going to be a car wash put there. This is a car wash that we do not need. There's a car wash across the street. There was a car wash a mile away. There's 2 car washes 2 miles down the road. There's another car wash being built half a mile down the road. This is a car wash that would be beside a school, beside a church, right beside a school, St. Patrick's School. It would also be right a block away from Incarnate Word. There's lots of kids about. There's already a lot of traffic, parents coming and going, picking up their kids. This is just not, it doesn't serve the interests of the residents of the area, which is the purpose, from my understanding, of changing a zone to a CN zone. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, sir. You will state your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Mike Schutz. I live on 3234 Topeka Street. And my concerns are also about the safety, especially with the children. For the car wash, if you look at their website, they just mention their soaps, but there's no way to get a safety data sheet for any of the products they use. And of course, they use a lot more than just soap. On mag wheels, you use hydrofluoric acid. You spray it on there. On a really windy day like today, you've got kids out playing on a playground. The wind is going to blow the stuff through there. As it travels on the air, the water evaporates and you get crystals that blow out there. And it's all over these kids. Now, if it's listed as a hazard for the people that work at the car wash, you know, you're exposing the children to it. It's just a terrible idea. We don't, like I say, we don't need it. We have plenty of car washes, so it's not serving the locals in the Morningside area.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak on items 3 through 7, 9, and 10?
Hello, my name is Raul Renteria. I live on 3212 Topeka Street, and I'm also speaking on item number 9, and I have my notes here. So Alameda and Santa Fe are major arteries in and out of downtown, and Texan Trail was already busy with going in between Santa Fe and Alameda. And so once it starts getting a little bit more congested, I fear that people are going to start using Claysbrook, which is a smaller neighborhood street, but it still is a direct access to Alameda and Santa Fe. Those people will start using that area. And then and I live in between Claysbrook and Texan Trail, so it concerns me. I have little children. And then also, my 2 children, we use Driscoll's Children's all the time, about twice a week with their services, and also the pediatric center that's right next to it. And there's also some radiology places there. There's also some eye places, things of that nature. And then there's that big area where it's like 20 miles an hour during business hours, normal business hours, and I think it'll just cause a lot of traffic that we don't need, where there's a lot of people already there utilizing services, to where I think it'll just become more of a hazard with like we already touched on. There's children right there with St. Patrick's, and then you have a lot of people commuting to the hospitals. In my opinion, I think it should be used for maybe some type of development of some office space or buildings that is hospital related. Just keep it all like the same, all on that little area. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, you're welcome.
Anyone else wishing to speak on those items?
Hello. How are y'all doing tonight?
Doing fine. Can I have your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is John Barron. I live at 3267 Topeka Street, where we have lived in that house for 30 years. That's on the corner of Texan Trail and Topeka Street, which is, my driveway is 40 feet away from the driveway entrance to the lot that's being considered for a rezoning. And I'm against the rezoning from ON Neighborhood Office District to the CN1 Neighborhood Commercial District. So it was the Sunday before last, October the 17th, and I kind of wrapped my head around it. Sitting on my front porch on that Sunday morning, it was really pleasant, peaceful, sun coming up, drinking my coffee, and I started thinking about, wow, we're going to have a car wash over there. It's going to be noisy, and I told my wife about it. She says, well, let's go check out the Quick Quack car wash over there on Airline, which is a block off of Alameda. So we got out over there about 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, and so I opened up I parked my car about the same distance from my house to the car wash, and what they had about 10 to 15 vacuums that were all occupied by people vacuuming their cars. They had the tunnel car washes moving. They have these 2 big fans that dry the water off of the cars when they emerge from the tunnel, and it's a lot of noise. So I guess then the car wash broke down, and you had a couple of workers out there with some hammers trying to get the track back on, and the cars were backing up and curling around the side of the business. So I thought about that. Man, that's a lot of noise. There's a lot of activity. So I thought about it. It got me to thinking, and I thought about the safety issues. The noise is one of them, but the safety is in our neighborhood, after 6 p.m. at night, during the regular business days, the traffic really dies down. Alameda and Texan Trail, it's busy because of the high school, the elementary school, the hospitals, And it really dies down. Our neighborhood becomes very peaceful. And the weekends, it becomes especially peaceful. And my thinking is, that's going to change if we put this car wash here. Their business operations are from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. every weekday, and from 7 p.m. to 7 p.m. on weekends. And it's obvious to me by my observations on that Sunday that this place is busy. They got a great business model. There's a lot of business there. So it's interesting to me that hearing the discussion here about park planning for our city and allocation of new lands and new developments. Well, the fact of the matter is our neighborhood doesn't have a park. We have IWA down the street, which is fenced off. We have St. Patrick's, which is fenced off. So our park is our backyards, our front yards, the streets, and the sidewalks. So we have a little.
Sir, your time has expired. Can you kind of wrap up?
I will wrap it up.
Thank you, please.
We have a
comments.
rejuvenation in our neighborhood. We have a bunch of younger families. It's a mature neighborhood. 75 years old is my house. And so we have a lot of children around that are going to be needing to use their park. So from a safety aspect, I believe that's a problem. So the tunnel car wash is not a service primarily for the benefit of the nearby residents. It's because, as I mentioned, we have a lot of car washes that are within easy driving distance for our neighborhood. And I just don't think it's going to benefit our neighborhood any to have the car wash there. It will benefit the owners of the car wash, that's for sure.
Sure.
And but thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment, sir. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on items 3 through 7, 9, or 10? Can we have your name and address, please?
Samuel Gutierrez. I'm at 3233 Topeka Street. Real quick, I'm just going to piggyback with these guys. We've had 7 to 10 outages at Topeka Street. So that's our electrical. I'm not sure their electrical, what kind of power they would use, but when I leave at night to work and my security's on, I'm hoping my son and my wife are safe. Now, if the power goes out and there's no heat, there's no AC, there's no security, I have to wonder if our infrastructure can handle that. Now, by all means, we want to we want Corpus to grow. I just don't feel a wash area would work in that area. Also, 75 cars down my street in 12 hours, just doing off my ring. If we get more cars, Topeka, we'll get a few more cars go through there. Again, it's dangerous. Just to piggyback off of these guys, it's just, we have a lot of kids, a lot of family, as you could tell, a lot of support in Topeka, which is right there. So I just want to give you, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on those items. Andrew, do we have all the comments back or the opposition on that
Yes.
item? What was the percentage on that?
None were received in opposition on the
mailing?
specific case.
Okay, and so do we have that recorded now? If they're within the 200 feet, I guess they have to turn in a piece of paper before council to?
Correct. There's still about a month of time before it reaches council in December to go ahead and turn in those yellow sheets if they received one.
Perfect. And if they have any questions about that, they can get with you after this meeting?
Absolutely.
That would be perfect. Any other comments from, yes, sir, Commissioner?
Andrew, I have a question. Could you pull the zoning map for that area?
Sure.
Please. Could you tell me what's the other 2 car washes that they were talking about near that area? Do you know?
The only closest one I'm familiar with is the H-E-B car wash that is just behind the service station. And Carnarvon is, I actually went to Carnarvon, so it's about 3 3/4 of a mile away, only because I have to jog that route with basketball every day. So it's quite a bit of distance. It is adjacent on the backside to the athletic field for St. Patrick's. And next door is a ear, nose, and throat office, also zoned currently ON. Of course, you have Doctors Regional across the street, along with its Physicians Plaza. There is a former gas station and Whataburger catty corner that's zoned general commercial, and then directly across Texan Trail is a restaurant, along with another series of doctors' offices. But again, the closest car wash I'm aware of is just the one behind the HEB there at Glazebrook in Alameda.
But surrounding to the subject property is pretty much all ON, is what I'm seeing, right?
Correct. You have ON to the south, to the adjacent property, general commercial across Alameda, and then ON across Texan Trail, along with, of course, the neighborhood and St. Patrick's Church and School.
And since right behind this property is RS, is there any like restrictions or limitation in terms of hours of operation for the car? Is it specifically for the car wash or?
So within the CN1 district, if you can see on the right side of the screen, those are the specific limitations as far as you have to abide by the noise ordinance. So if it breaks that 65 decibel limit, they have to make the appropriate attenuation to reduce the size of fans. And this is something we've encountered with other car washes in the past. So
it's already factored in?
Yes. So
Okay.
that noise ordinance, there's a good handful of the decibel meters with patrol officers, and they actually come out and take a reading from the site, the edge of the property line, to determine what the decibel reading is. Second, there is automatically a limit on hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then lastly, anything regarding lighting has to be controlled on site. They're not allowed to trespass or bleed any lighting outside of the subject property.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Schrader.
Okay, Andrew, since we have to evaluate this based on the difference between the two zonings and not a specific use.
Correct.
Can you summarize effectively the allowed uses that are added to this prospective property with CN1 versus in changing it from the ON?
Absolutely. The main difference between the two districts, you have density of multifamily if by some reason somebody chose that route. Usually the reason that folks are seeking CN versus ON is the ability to have unrestricted retail and unrestricted restaurant size. So I should say unrestricted. So in the CN1 district, you can have up to a 5,000 square foot restaurant, and there is no limitation on your size of retail. In the ON district, it must be secondary to your office use. So if you can imagine, there's the New York Life building, or now it's called Clayburgh building. You can only have a restaurant on the first floor. You couldn't make 3 floors restaurant and 1 floor office. It must always be secondary and accessory. So that's another reason folks will seek the CN1 district versus keeping an ON type of situation.
So effectively, this would permit a increase in traffic based on a change in zoning.
Today, strictly on traffic matters, the existing zoning today, if they were to build a multifamily complex, you would have an increase in traffic. It's a little bit difficult when you're measuring against a doctor's office because it's a very set amount of hours with low traffic as patients are coming in and out. So regardless, anything that's going to have a higher person or patronage is going to dramatically increase traffic.
Yes. Okay. So in other words, the difference in permitted uses of this change would effectively make it possible to impact this from a traffic flow standpoint.
Correct.
And is there, with the Glazebrook is essentially what Texan Trail becomes on the other side of Alameda, between Alameda and Santa Fe. As I recall, that is
a 2-lane with on-street parking.
A 2-lane and no curbs, no curb and gutter. Is it currently considered, as it's built now, capable of supporting greater traffic?
There is curb and gutter on both sides. It only has a sidewalk on the St. Patrick side, the southern bound lane of Texan Trail. There hasn't been any real consideration about widening it, only because we would have to incorporate additional land. Now, you could, in effect, reduce the amount of on-street parking. In this essence, the folks, just knowing the neighborhood, some of the workers at the doctor's office would park on-street. So with that use now converting to a potential car wash, you're not going to have as many on-street persons parking during the daytime hours. Now, I know folks, parents will also use that back fence area to pick up their children as an alternative means rather than having to use Alameda. So you'll still have peak hour trips for the time that school is letting out. But outside of that, the only other portion of Texan Trail that has a large amount of on-street parking as you reach the office building at the corner of Texan Trail and Santa Fe. Outside of that, there's not too much on-street parking.
Okay, and then the final question, in regard to the noise, is there a difference in the decibel levels permitted from ON1 to CN1?
No, it is the same noise requirements across the city.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner York.
Thank you. Beyond this snapshot, from what I recall, most of the north side of Alameda is pretty much all offices, doctor offices, that kind of thing. Is there anything else as you go kind of off the screen here on the north side of Alameda that's actually commercial or whether general neighborhood? Or is it all neighborhood office?
It is mostly at the neighborhood office scale. There's a few daycares, dentist offices, real estate as you go towards Doddridge, and then going the other way, it's also a continuation of several medical offices, and I believe the old Dobson building is as you approach across the street from HEB. Most of the high commercial is going to be on the south side of Alameda between Driscoll, Doctors Regional, HEB, Whataburger.
Right, and the reason I ask, it seems kind of like, it was done intentionally. It sort of steps down, commercial neighborhood office, and then the house is right behind that. But on the future land use, this actually, I believe, was shown as commercial. Is that correct?
Yes. So, which is not completely atypical. Whenever you have a major intersection, that is usually the place you want to have your higher intensity commercial uses because of that flowing of traffic. You usually won't want to put, unless it's surrounded by commercial, you won't want to put one red block, mid block. You want to have it on your corners. Again, it's about traffic flow.
So it's actually the intent for all of that neighborhood office ultimately could become commercial?
Really, it's just showing that corner section, and then across the street, north of Texan Trail, yes, you could have an eventual change to more of an intense commercial use. Now, keep in mind that can include things like townhouses, which is occurring right on the front side of Incarnate Word. There's a vacant lot that is changing to townhouses currently. So it's not necessarily always going to be a quote-unquote commercial use, but it will be something probably more intense in nature, traffic-wise.
Okay. The last thing I want to ask is specific to car washes. We've had this come up, seems like a lot more often lately, and these things are popping up everywhere. Some of them are often, more commercial areas, but there have been a few that are backed up right to neighborhoods like this one would be, and they seem to get a lot of complaints. Has staff looked at any changes to the ordinance that might separate the car wash use from like this type of zoning or requiring special permits or anything to treat that differently?
It's funny you say that. So originally, the whole reason that we necessitated the text amendment to begin with is because we had a rash of special permits, I would say a good 10 over the last 5 years that were specific to car washes in this very similar situation. So we saw an opportunity to simplify the process rather than taking an applicant through the entire rezoning just for a special permit. Rather than to allow it with conditions in the CN1 district. So essentially, we took the special permit conditions and applied it to the situation. And that's exactly what the ordinance reads. These are straight out of those zoning cases.
And that was at the request of council. They had so many of these car wash special permits coming before them that they said, why can't we just embed it in a base zoning with the limitations that you would normally see with a special permit?
And I guess that leads to is this pretty common other uses that would be grouped together with a car wash in other places, other cities?
It's not uncommon. Today, a gas station could be built and an accessory at CN1. across the street, and a car wash is allowed as an accessory use. So it's just that car washes are now becoming more of a predominant standalone use rather than paired with the service station.
All right, thank you.
Any other
I just have one
questions?
question, because with the change of it to CN1, that also potentially allows the people to do an apartment complex. And obviously,
Technically, yes.
since there's residential behind it, that could create that kind of a controversy, you know? So, to Commissioner, your point, is there, that zoning of CN1 does not, you know, create any boundaries as far as, okay, if this is for car wash purposes, I can understand, but for the CN1, it opens up other possibilities.
Correct. CN1, the car wash plan might fall through, and it could be a Taco Bell the next day.
Yes.
Which is matching what's catty corner across the street with a Whataburgers. And that's not just to pick on one franchise versus another, but those are the type of opportunities CN1 opens up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, at this time, I will consider a motion for items 3 through 7 and item 10. Do I have a motion for those items?
I'll make a motion, we approve items 3 through 7 and item number 10 is presented by staff.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 9. Do I have any other comment or questions for staff regarding that item, or a motion otherwise?
I'll make a motion, we approve item 9 as presented by staff.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Having a motion and a second, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Okay. Chairman Ball,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Dibble,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Opposed?
Commissioner Zarguni,
Opposed.
Commissioner Miller,
Opposed?
Commissioner York,
Opposed.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Mandel is absent, and Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Oppose.
Motion does not pass.
Thank you. At this time, do I have a motion to consider otherwise? Or do we have to open that back up, or is that we have to get a motion that passes, correct? Yes, so I need another motion, please.
I'll make a motion that we deny the zoning change for item number 9.
We opened it for public hearing and nobody else wished to speak at that time. I apologize. I tried to wait as long as I possibly could at that time. I agree. I can.
It is up to the chair if you wish
At
to
this
have
time,
the-
prior to the motion, I will open for the applicant to speak. It is the applicant. If you'd like to make your comment, you will have the 3 minutes as everybody else, please.
Oh, three minutes as applicant?
Well, at this reopening of it, I would like to consider it for that. So this is, that's, well,
Think about, especially on the heels of that. So it's future land use, shows commercial, Joseph Ernest, 2208 West, 700 South, Springville. Future land use shows commercial. I have asked specifically for the least robust commercial zone to fit the land use map, the land use designation, which would be CN1, because it applies conditions to the car wash that are, I think, meaningful to be a good neighbor, especially to the school to the east. In that area, I think it's a great area for a car wash. It's a high traffic intersection, and Quick Quack goes above and beyond to make sure that our site sizes are more than adequate in size to maintain all of our own traffic. We also are always open to a masonry wall on the east side, especially with that field and that school. Other things that we do to make sure that we're excellent neighbors is our operating hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the winter, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the summer. Our sound abatement, we have sound abatement measures to make sure that the car wash will always be quieter than Alameda Street. We have lighting measures to make sure our lights are turned off automatically at appropriate times to make sure we're good neighbors. We have water conservation efforts to be a good citizen, commercial citizen for the city. We have so many things that we do to try and be excellent neighbors, and all of the comments from the neighbors that were said, we have ways of mitigating all of those things. So because my time is short, I plead with you that instead of denying it, you think of meaningful ways to impose restrictions on us that maybe you might be concerned about, so that instead of denying the property right, because we're the property owners, instead of just denying the property right, because it is consistent with your land use, maybe we be a little bit more thoughtful about how we can be a good neighbor. And if I had more time, I think I could very adequately resolve your concerns for this car wash. Humbly, I think we do a lot better job than a lot of other car washes. We're next to residences all the time, and we do not have complaints. We have over 150 operating locations. Again, sound, we're excellent. We're excellent on lighting. We're excellent on traffic flow. We are very safe with the neighbors. We contain all our own traffic. This use on this corner, I can't think of a better spot for a car wash, and it's what the city wants per the land use map, right? I didn't ask for CG2. I don't need, I asked for, again, the least robust commercial use to try and accommodate the city, but also allow the city to bind me with regulations on that car wash. So that was, I guess, a long story short. I had more for you, but that 3 minutes. And man, I understand where the neighbors are coming from, but sincerely, I don't think they would have an issue with us, and I would be happy to address their concerns.
And we'd like to likely ask questions, and I'll open it up to that, and maybe that'll give you some time to address these questions. So
Yes,
one
sir.
moment. At this time, do we have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Salazar Garza?
Yes, okay, so being the fact that there's been some chemicals that you have to use, exactly what's the borderline on these chemicals that are hazard and that, because I know that sometimes there's some big trucks that have to go in to get cleaned up and you've got to use some special chemical to get it all off. And I'm familiar with car washes and it spreads all over the place. So tell me something about the chemicals that you do use.
Great question. Thank you, ma'am. All of the soaps, all of the maintenance equipment, all of it is biodegradable. None of it is harmful chemicals. We meet the strictest standards of all of the cities, and even the things that we are putting into the drains. We have 3 reclaim tanks underneath the tunnel, massive reclaim tanks for water conservation, and also recycling and cleaning the water, oil water separators, things like that cities require to make sure that even what goes into the stormwater drains and the sewer drains, everything's clean.
And being the fact that you're on a corner and the RS6 residential is on another side, are you planning on putting some kind of a fence or something to?
Absolutely, yeah, we could do a masonry wall. I've talked to Andrew about that. I think it actually is required in your ordinance for a car wash in a CN1 zone. Happy to do it. Happy to do what we need to. And the site plan, I remember the site plan, we don't have the tunnels not close to the field. It's very safe as far as the site flow next to the field. Just so you're aware, at St. Patrick's, it's a massive field right there. I don't know if it'll ever change, but even if it does, we could have a masonry wall and it'd be great forever for anyone.
That area, there's just so many people that are walking around, from the hospital to the kids at the private school, St. Patrick, and just all around that area. So I was just wanting to, there was another question. And
So to your point about people walking around in that corner, something different about us, and actually some of these tunnel washes are like this now more often. I think people, when they think of car washes historically, they're unmanned, there's no employees, it's just kind of come and go as you please, and no one's there to guide you. Totally different experience now. We have always on site when the car wash is open, 2 to 3 employees that are directing traffic if there is ever an issue, and our striping on the site to direct traffic, it's clearer than an airport. I mean, it is. I mean, because of course we would have major issues if we had cars not knowing where to go on the site. So we make it very clear for everybody.
You say you have several of them around.
Airline and Cimarron's one of them. We have one off of South Staples. We have, and in Western United States, we have California, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, several markets here in Texas as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schrader.
I just wanted to make this point just for clarity. My opposition to this change has nothing to do with your project. In fact, I'm a user personally of the facility. I think you guys do a very nice job. My opposition to this is the actual zoning, because I'm not considering what's going here, because if you decide to sell it next week, it's whatever we change it to.
Sure.
My concern around this revolves to the fact that this change in zoning for this particular spot changes the potential for the amount of traffic that could visit the site. Not in relation to whether you are going to or not going to stack up traffic. It has nothing, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know anything about that. It is the fact that when we're considering changing this from ON to CN1, this particular site has school in 3 directions. It has hospital just down the street, and it is a sensitive area to traffic flow, and it does have congestion issues in relation to the area. So that's the reason that I'm concerned with. I do think this is a fairly significant distinction between a lower use ordinance zone, and the next level up in this particular case. So I just wanted to make that statement about that, and it has. I think it's important in this body to make sure that, again, we're not here to regulate on a particular business or use or anything of the sort, because we don't know what that's going to be in the end.
Commissioner, one potential solution, and I don't know if this is would be a solution for your concern, is traffic studies, but it sounds like you're more concerned about pedestrians and vehicles.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Two questions. One in reference to what Commissioner Schroeder said. Andrew, is it possible, like with, in this case, that they approve a special permit strictly with the intended occupancy? Or so in the event that if it changed, like Commissioner Sheldon said, that, it would go back to the ON?
Absolutely. So in scenarios where we have significant concerns from a neighborhood, tabling for the drafting of a special permit that would alleviate any concerns that the neighborhood might have and address specific conditions is definitely an option the commission has.
Okay. Second question is for the applicant. You talked about that you guys do a really good job with the traffic. I know that, like, I've used the one at Cimarron and Airline, and on one entrance, you do have good traffic flow. There's a lot of cars that are able to line up. One of the things that I noticed with these quick quacks is you guys have 3 lanes, but 99% of the time there's only 1 lane open. So what happens is you have on that particular location, you have 2 entrances, one coming off of Airline, the other one coming off of Cimarron. But on the one coming off of Airline, that one tends to back up because the driveway's a lot shorter. In this particular location, how many entrances are y'all proposing?
Andrew, are you able to show the site plan by chance?
Yes, absolutely.
I know it's in the staff report. I thought might as well look at it. That's great feedback. Kind of as an aside, I'll call them, because they should open the lanes, right?
Yeah, and I've been to several of them, and it's usually they have 1 lane open, and it does create a traffic cluster.
Sure.
Never really understood why they had 3 and usually 1.
So you can see there's, I look at a lot of these site plans, and compared to even other quick quacks, this has more stacking and queuing than a lot of the other ones. If you're looking at the site plan, you can see that there's 2 stacking lanes, queuing lanes, that are fully dedicated to stacking all the way running along the east side from north to south. And then those convert into 3 lanes that are basically the entrance to the car wash, which is, again, it's an abundance of stacking and queuing. And that's by design. We actually over-purchase real estate so that even when we're really, really busy, it doesn't look so busy that people wouldn't want to come.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal to us. Also, one note, as I'm seeing this school, the hours of drop-off and pickup for schools are different than the car wash's peak hours. So I don't see a conflict point. I think a traffic engineer would confirm that as well, and you wouldn't have to take my word for it.
So on the site plan, You know, I'm not really, I'm kind of hard to kind of see where you're talking about, but is one driveway, are they pretty much the same length, like distance in where they can stack up? Or is one shorter than the other, like the Cimarron location?
These are all the same length.
Okay, they're all the same
Commissioner.
length.
And then also, we stack after what we call the quarterback station, and up to 4 vehicles can go in the tunnel at once as it's going through the conveyor.
Right.
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Commissioner Miller.
Is there I see your drive off of Alameda, and again, you know, we're kind of in the weeds on the whole car wash deal right now. We're really considering zoning, but just out of curiosity, do you have a joint access agreement with the neighboring property owner? Because it looks like your property line goes halfway through the.
Yeah, yes, sir. We own that property as well.
Oh, you own that property as well?
Also, for what it's worth, I'm a planning commissioner in my city, and I strongly prefer to know what's going to go there before granting a rezone, although I totally, completely agree and consider what you're saying when there's an applicant in front of me. We're a city of 40,000, one of the fastest growing cities in Utah, which is one of the fastest growing states in the United States. And it's been that way for 10 years, so we have a lot of challenges. But QuickQuack has purchased this. We have every intention of this being a car wash, and we would agree to anything that would nullify any zone change if it wasn't. We would gladly agree to something like that.
And when your staff, you know, realizes that all of the stacking lanes are you know, full, I mean, are they just waving people along, or is it?
So, great question, and not to sound naive, but the amount of stacking on this site, it should never be full, ever. Full to the point where it's backing up onto streets. It should never, ever happen with that size of queuing. And we could provide a traffic engineering report to confirm that. But even when we're slammed, if all 3 lanes are open, to Commissioner Gonzalez's point, we would only see 6 to 7 cars backed up from the point of greeting by the employee. 6 to 7 cars total in each lane. That would be we would be exceeding all of our best economic projections. And to that point, I heard about there might be a lot of car washes. I would say I'm an Adam Smith Wealth of Nations capitalism guy. I would say retailers competing for business is a good thing. I mean, if car washes need to innovate to capture market share, compete on pricing, these are good things, I think, for the city. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Yes, sir. Commissioner.
In reference to what Commissioner Miller said, and as far as, you know, how many cars it can handle in those stacking lanes, what is the capacity of cars? You know, what do y'all estimate that those lanes can, with the 3 open and the 2 stacking lanes, approximately how many cars?
Well, we anticipate 30 to 40 in an hour, and our peak hours exceed that. So it's actually an interesting question. You'd think I know the answer, but our traffic memos that we pay traffic engineers to produce, they always tell me what we expect and that our site is more than adequate. They never tell me the full capacity. They always say, "Oh, you're fine. You could go more, a lot more," but they never tell me the full capacity. It's always well under.
So let's just say the car wash broke, because I've been there when the track goes down.
Issue. That would be an issue.
And the lanes start to stack up. How many cars can your lanes in that particular location hold without the car wash moving? Because, you know, one of the other concerns would be is, you know, people are not aware. They pull into the driveway, someone pulls in behind them, and now they start stacking.
Commissioner, there would be an exact number that would answer this that my engineer would produce for you, but me counting, which I'm pretty good at it too, it would be 50 before we're even in the cross access.
Oh, wow, okay.
So there's that shared access there that is still our property.
Right.
It'd be 50 before we get to that. Just so you're aware. But we would not want to be in that either, but yeah, it's an abundance.
Okay.
And at this time, we do not have a motion yet, but are you okay if the motion is tabled and come back with a special permit option, or just I wanted to get your take before we go
I
to a
am
motion?
absolutely okay with anything the city feels comfortable with. I get the rezone and not having a binding use. So if the city feels more comfortable having a use known, we really want to have a car wash there and clean cars in the city and expand the number of units we have. We love being a part of the city. I love working with Andrew. I didn't even get to say that because we're just so rushed because I came up late. But Andrew's been phenomenal. The staff is phenomenal. This is I think our fourth or fifth go through the city. So thank you for what it's worth. And yes, we're okay with that.
Commissioner Gonzalez, did you have another question? Commissioner Salazar Garza?
I'm just curious to know, being the fact that you've chosen to put a car wash there, what made you decide to do that? I mean, you have to do some kind of a marketing strategy to
Fantastic.
find out what, for wherever business, you have to put the business where the people are. So
Yes,
what made you
ma'am.
decide on the car wash?
It was the same reason the powers that be at the city designated that corner as commercial. But we probably did a far more extensive research than even the land use map for the city. So the land use map for the city, it's a hard corner. It's heavily trafficked. That's fantastic for commercial, right? So there was a lot of studying on the traffic, the amount of traffic. Again, it's on a hard corner, and also strategically as far as where our other sites are, and to make sure that we're as fully as possible serving the citizens of Corpus Christi so that they can go to a quick quack car wash and it's convenient. So that's one of our things is it's very convenient to go to a quick quack car wash. We're actually a lot faster than other car washes that are similar to us. Our site flow is faster. The experience is quality and fast, and people come to rely on that, and we love it. But yeah, a lot of factors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. At this time, I will reclose the public comment for this portion. I cannot open it. No, sir. No, sir. I'm not going to reopen the public comment. No, thank you. All right. At this time, we will consider a motion from the Planning Commission for item 9.
Actually, I got a question for staff real quick.
Please.
Just to clarify, we've talked about the possibility of doing a special permit. Is that something that would require tabling, or could we propose that in a motion today?
I would, and this is just my opinion, I would prefer if you were to table. That way we have time. It really gives the neighborhood a chance. So the idea would be we collect everyone's contact information. I'm sure they're on the sign-up sheet, and we can distribute a draft of the special permit for their feedback. So it may not necessarily be the very next Planning Commission meeting, but it could be the one after that.
But it also
Sure, just wanna
captures
know the
all
options.
all the potential comments.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, do I have a motion from the Planning Commission?
I'll make a motion to table the item.
Well, I already made a motion, right? We did one prior to that, correct? So, yes, we do have a motion on the table. I have a second. Yeah, sorry. So Buck, how does that work? We need to vote on, or have a second to his, because I opened public hearing after.
If there's no second, then you can move forward with the next motion.
All right, there was not a second at that time. So at this time, do I have a motion
Yes, I'll make a motion to table the item.
until,
Next meeting, unless it's, more time is needed.
Mr. Demus?
It just needs to be date certain, otherwise we have to renotice. So it would either be the November 10th or the first meeting in December, which is December 8th, I believe.
So we make a motion to table it to November 10th.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Just,
Mr. Buck?
does
I
that
have a
give you
comment.
enough time, Andrew, if it's the 10th?
I can draft a pretty quick special permit, but my more concern is to make sure we distribute it to give the neighborhood a chance to, at least we can post it on the website and have them log on to see what the contents are. But I can tell you in past experience from other special permits, it's exactly what we stated. There's going to be a little bit clearer noise requirements. We can tighten up the hours of the operation, require the masonry fence as the buffer yard is already required. And that should take care of, other than traffic, you can solve 90% of the concerns.
Can I pull that motion and to change the date to the December 1st to give the neighborhood?
Prior to, I'd like to address our attorney. Mr. Buck?
What's the question at hand?
Well, I have your name up here. I just wanted to see if you had a comment at this time. Do you not have a button pushed up there?
No, I pushed the response, we're playing tag here.
That's all right. I just wanted to check that. All right. So yes, if you'd like to amend your motion, please do so.
Yes, I'd like to amend my motion that we table it to the December 1st? 8th meeting. Correct.
All right. I have a
I'll
motion
second
to
that.
table. I have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes to table.
Sorry, who was the second on that?
Commissioner York. So it is tabled to the 8th. There will be a draft of a special permit. Once it comes back to the 8th, it will be opened back up for public hearing again. And that's why I did not want to reopen, because it's going to go back and forth and there's no point to argue at this point. It will come back up. It will be renoticed. Actually, it will not be renoticed because we have a specific date for the 8th.
I can go out and amend the sign.
That would be fantastic, Andrew.
Also, we can post the draft special permit on our website.
Thank you. And at this time, if you could direct your questions to staff after we finish this comment. Thank you. I have a motion, a second, and an approval. So moving on to the public hearing portion of it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. I believe we left off with number 9.
No, we already finished all those. We should.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's number 8.
We pulled 8. We should be starting with 8. Correct. Yeah.
I apologize. Good evening. Again, for the record, Andrew Demas with Development Services. Case 1021-05, Shakar Raj. The rezoning from the RS10 district, which is a single-family district, to the RMAT multifamily AT district. The property is located at the intersection of Airline Road and Ocean Drive. We can give them a minute.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, all smiles. Looking at an aerial view of the subject property, so this is a little bit of a dated photo. To the left-hand side of the subject property is an up-and-coming apartment complex called the Alexa, which is currently under construction, and you have a vacant lot to the right, which is still current. As you can see, the adjacent pattern of zoning and adjacent developments, you have several lots that are zoned RS10. This is essentially the original zoning for the area when we adopted zoning in 1947. You have spots of RMAT with special permits for various condominiums, and you have RMAT catty corner for a more recent apartment complex and a few special permits. There is also a planned unit development located across the street that was done in 1982. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen are all the various conditions that would apply in the event of an approval of the RMAT district, meaning you would be required to have a buffer yard of 10 feet and 10 points. There are required setbacks, especially involving height. So if you recall what we call the 1 to 2 rule, meaning for every foot you go up above that 12 foot, you have to remain 2 feet off of a property line that you share with a single-family residence. I know it's very confusing. It's hard for me to keep it straight half the time myself. There is also pretty strong parking requirements when it comes to potential apartment complexes, 1.5 spaces per unit for one bedroom, and of course there are landscaping, lighting, and screening requirements. As far as land use is concerned, the current land use is of course vacant, and the future land use is low-density residential, which is exactly what RS10 due to its larger lot size. Now, as far as utilities are concerned, all utilities are available to the subject property. Now, as far as public notifications, we received 3 letters of opposition, which roughly constitutes just under 30% from the surrounding property owners, 0 in favor. Now, the story behind it, which I'm sure you saw in the staff report, is that the property owner is looking to increase options for the sale of the property. So there is not a quote-unquote development plan to say that this will be apartments or this will be a single-family home. The history on the property is at one point there was a plan submitted for a single-family home to be constructed and was never officially pulled or completed. So construction never was initiated. However, a permit was issued. Second, there were some discussions about potentially selling the property to adjacent property owners, and that's where the concern came about potentially building a single-family home next to Phase 2 of the Alexa. So what we're looking at and what staff was struggling with the recommendation is either do we match the same zoning as the Alexa, so this property owner has the chance to sell the property to someone, or to come up with some transitional zoning. Some options on the table would be RSTF, which is two-family, that will allow duplexes or a small number of townhomes. Another option is RM1, which is a maximum density of 22 units per acre. The reason staff inevitably said yes to approval of the RMAT is it does match the zoning for quite a bit of the Ocean Drive proper in this area. So we didn't want to get into an issue of potentially spot zoning of picking a random district to put next door. However, we do recognize that if commission was interested in a more of a transitional district, that would be an appropriate use.
Thank
And
you.
if there are any questions, be more than happy to address them.
Commissioner Miller.
Andrew, my biggest concern about this particular piece of property is its adjacency to the that intersection, and that's a really funky kind of intersection. You know, you've got a turn to the south, and then you've got kind of a deceleration lane to turn left on Airline, and then you've got a median or an island kind of in the middle. And so I'm worried about if there was additional high traffic flow from some pretty serious density at that particular spot, you know, how would you work out approaches? How would you do? It just seems kind of tough.
That's a fair question. So driveway standards as we have in the UDC today would more than likely limit them to just one driveway. There wouldn't be the opportunity for any additional. That's the exact issue we wrestled with the Alexa, is that there is such a large amount of traffic because I believe they have a 3-story parking garage. So there's so many units that are going to be moving in and out of that site that we purposely had to find a way to distance those driveway approaches away from the intersection. So it would be a smooth transition. You wouldn't have someone make a left off of Airline and immediately have to make a right and cross traffic into Ocean to get on site. That's something that I know traffic engineering was trying to think of, maybe delineators or some other way, kind of think where Best Buy is, you had the plastic delineators to try to separate to avoid people from making a hard right after a left. So the fortunate thing is it's on a one-way side of the street, meaning if someone were to exit the property, it's impossible. They could physically not make a left from this property. So folks would have to access the site by going down Ocean and making a U-turn, or inherently coming up Ennis Jocelyn and accessing the site that way. So the one advantage to having that island there in that specific spot is you do eliminate the complete possibility of left-hand turns and those negative interactions, where that is a very real concern with the Alexa, where you have the potentiality of someone making a left through one of these cut-throughs on the median.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also have been notified of at least two people within the notification area that claim that they never got any notice, and I know that this is kind of a recurring theme here recently. I
can tell you the addresses that we use, and sometimes they are dated, do come from the appraisal district. So the letter that they're receiving their property taxes, now that it's property tax time, the letter that they're receiving in the mail from property tax is the very same address we are using when we mail the notices. Now, I have heard word from the Postal Service, I made a few phone calls myself, that they are experiencing slowdowns just because of supply chain issues. And I'm sure that's going to get worse with the holidays coming. But there is, I've double checked the addresses several times to ensure that, yes, they're going to the right places. Now, sometimes folks change P.O. boxes and may not necessarily update every single person that they receive mail from. It's the only thing I can account for. Many times we do see a lot of PO boxes as far as addresses.
Okay, and I fully appreciate the applicant's desire to create a more marketable piece of property at that point, considering the neighbors that they probably did not know were going to be their neighbors at the time of purchasing that property. But I would much rather see this perhaps get tabled and get the applicant to work with some of the people within the notification area to perhaps come up with a special permit that would, allow certain amenities for the Alexa development and/or additional parking or something like that, but additional density at that corner is concerning to me from a traffic and from a traffic standpoint.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner York.
Thank you. Just a comment in the report mentioned that basically the applicant didn't feel the property was marketable with apartments next door, so therefore they're going to rezone to apartments, but that really just pushes the problem onto the next person.
They were looking for options as far, sorry to interrupt you, it was options for future development. So the applicant did not have a specific plan to say, other than the actual plans that were submitted for a single-family home, but the idea would be you have a vacant lot next door. Some of the discussions I've had with other folks about that vacant lot next door is under contract right now, so there is a potentiality that one of the adjacent homes could be expanding as a potential option. So it may not necessarily be that another house is going to be next door, but you might now have a larger estate of an existing home. Two, it doesn't inherit, just like the car wash case we had before us, the zoning doesn't necessarily dictate that there will be an apartment complex. I think there are some other options out there that could be more transitional, like RSTF or RM1, that could reduce the amount of density if that's a concern of the amount of traffic, or that it will specifically be apartments. RSTF's a good option because it doesn't allow apartments, but it allows duplexes and townhomes, which then you tend to have property ownership versus renters, and it's a different kind of folks that will live on site. So I would like to say that, to give that opportunity to the applicant to try to find some way of increasing their marketability rather than just specifically a single-family home.
Yeah, understood. I mean, this has always been kind of a hard point, right, at Airline, where it goes from multifamily to residential. So maybe something transitional might be better, but it seems to me like they're just pushing that line over to try and make the situation better for them. Can you go back to that slide? Did the Alexa apartments, they're in opposition to this?
Yes, ironically,
Okay.
an
Just
RMAT.
want to make sure I saw that right.
Folks that have RMAT opposed to RMAT, but
Okay.
go figure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schrader.
I wanted to confirm that the property to the north is, the immediate adjacent property boundary to the north is fully contiguous as part of that Alexa
It
development?
is Alexa Phase 2, yes.
Okay, and that's already permitted?
I've seen draft plans. I don't believe Phase 2 has been officially permitted. I think they're still working on some infrastructure issues, but Phase 1 is well under construction.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zarguni.
Is there a vacant land to the right side of the subject property, or there's a house on it?
Yes, sir. That is a vacant property that is currently under contract to be sold.
And zoning on that one is RS10.
Correct.
And just to clarify, the Alexis property was zoned 1947?
1940, it's not so much that it was zoned 1947. 1947 is when we adopted zoning in the city of Corpus Christi. This area was annexed far before that. So it was the zoning that was applied to the site afterward. So if you can imagine, Flower Bluff was annexed in 61, had no zoning, so then we had to apply zoning in 1961 to Flower Bluff. So it's when I cannot find the history of a site because it hasn't changed zoning since the time of annexation, it's more than likely because zoning was applied at the date we actually enacted zoning.
I have one more question. How big is the subject property?
Subject property is 0.72 acres.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add on to it, so I actually ran a quick potential development of what that would look like. So let's say the commission did say yes to RMAT. What would that look like if, for some crazy reason, somebody wanted to put apartments? You would have a maximum of 43 units. That would require 95 parking spaces. You would have buffer yard requirements of 10 feet and 10 points. More than likely, the masonry fence would also come into play. You would have pretty significant setbacks. And on top of that, the 2-to-1 ratio when it comes to height restrictions. So if you can imagine 43 units plus the parking and the landscaping and the buffer is not going to fit on this site. It's simply too small. So the reality of apartments actually being built here, just in my opinion, is not likely. I would anticipate it's going to be something more like townhomes or duplexes at worst, simply because you just can't fit 95 parking spaces at maximum density on 0.72 acres. It's not logical.
Thank you. Commissioner York.
Thank you for that. Something I forgot to ask earlier, I think we all received an email on council and maybe staff as well, saying something about this having been planned for a park. Can you speak to that at all? Because it looked like the future land use map did not show that. Is that on
Correct.
a redevelopment plan? Or?
In the history of the site, I think at one point airline was shown to continue into the bay and there was to be a separation. We ran into a very similar issue of a linear park near A&M Corpus where Alameda was actually shown to cross Ennis Jocelyn into that wetland area. So it might have been listed on an old map as a potential park or some type of public dedication that never came to fruition. For whatever reason, the city chose to go to a T intersection, and I'm sure at the time didn't anticipate there would be this much density there, but
right. So there's nothing in area development plan or any other,
I believe it was in an older plan back in the day to show, again, some type of future dedication. But just as the Ennis Jocelyn scenario, it never came to pass.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Yes, Andrew, yeah, well, that street there has always been a concern as far as the traffic, and trying to put something there with, I see it as maybe a little bit higher density. I think that street is already considered high density because it's just hard, being that there's not even a turning lane to turn to the left or right. You have to go into the medium there to get across. But I was just wanting to find out, when you do the process of mailing out the information, because I've heard this from several people and we've discussed it here, several of the other items that we deal with. What's the process that you take when you do send out notice to the people?
So, and that's a great point. So that's a perfect refresher. Actually, I'm going to add that to the zoning 101 when we do the training, so we can go a little more in depth. But the quick version is, whenever we receive an application, we immediately request zoning maps from our GIS department, and they will produce an ownership list of all the persons that live within 200 feet of the subject property, and then the percentage of how much land that they own. That is how we come up with these, what we call the 20% rule. We measure that is based on, in this proverbial ring, how much, as you can see, all of Lot 2 is in the ring, all of Lot 4 is in the ring. So they have almost like a bigger share as of the pie compared to Lot 7 across the street, which only is a portion in the ring. So when we receive this ownership list, we take this map, we put it on a mailer along with the information about the zoning case, what the proposed use will be, and we send it out to every person on that list. Now again, we're banking on that as the most up-to-date information from the county appraisal district, which is the data source of that list.
Within what kind of time?
It is, let's see, maps are produced within 11 days prior. So for instance, these notices went out not this past, let's see, 2 Fridays ago, and the list is usually produced the Wednesday before that mail out. So
are we going to consider the new rule now for the U.S. Postal, that now they're going to be taking a little bit longer to receive their mail?
So today we're mailing in accordance with state statute, and so we're following the letter of the law. We can take that into consideration, but that at a point, in order to give more time for the mail out, we would have to push zoning cases further into future planning commission dates. So that gets to a point of is that we want to send out notices later, but it's going to be at the cost of the applicant that they're now going to have to wait longer for that case to get resolved before council, because anything we do at the planning commission level, we have to mirror for city council. So that lengthens our metric, which is everything less than 90 days. Right now, we average in the 70s of date of application all the way to second reading at city council. That could very much increase the amount of time. And and it's not to say that developers are more important than your folks that are living around the area. That's just to say that that pushes their time frame that much longer. So
That's fine.
sometimes
I
there's
just like to make sure that the people are getting enough time notice to be able to come and speak on behalf of whatever it is that we have to discuss. You know, that's it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments for staff? Did the applicant have any comment on tabling? I think we talked about that prior to.
Yes, I believe she is present
Perfect.
to
Check comment.
speak.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open the public comment portion and ask that the applicant please come up first. And if you will, state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Shekhar Raj, and this is my wife, Veena Raj. And I'm just going to make it brief because because lack of time, and it's not much on this one. So I'm going to go over the points which Andrew made, just to reemphasize. So when we bought this land, we never had any intention to build any multifamily home or anything. We wanted to just build a good house and stay there. Then we had the permit, and we spent a lot of money, we were about to dig, then we saw a multi-complex building coming next to it. Then we were advised that, your house will not hold the value, you think twice before you doing it, maybe downsize it. I thought, okay, we'll downsize the house. We started replanning it for single-family house. Then at that time, the Alexa offered, that's why we'll buy your land. I said, okay, then in that case, okay, we'll sell it to them, even though they were asking price was less than the market value. We didn't want to take a risk of building a nice house, and in case if you get into financial trouble, we'll not be getting out because it's hard to sell high-end houses in that area. So then they kind of dragged along for a few months until they get the permit for the next the land, because there is a clause there's a clause in the thing that if the building is already there, they have to leave twice the distance of the height. If there is no existing building, they can encroach up to 30 feet to the land. That's what they're doing now. With the second phase, they kind of gave us the option to sell the land. Then now they're building, then they're very close to that. Now there's 30 feet from our land. So it's very difficult for us to do anything now other than maybe consider building some multifamily, maybe 4 or 6 units or something like that. So we don't know. We don't really know what to make out of it or what to do it. But it's not easy to sell the land either. So we are not getting anything out of the land with investment or our money, and we are paying the property taxes. So we wanted to make sure that we have to get something out of this land. So we wanted to have the options open so that we can utilize the land best. Just because I'm asking for this zoning, it doesn't mean that we're going to build a big thing because the property is small. I don't think we can do that. Then another thing I wanted to address was that the Alexa people are opposing this, telling that if we build something, their value goes down. Actually, it's the other way around. Because they built it, our land value has gone down, and if you build a house, our value will go down. And we are our whatever apartment we are going to build will be very small. It's not going to be a magnitude of Apexa. Then there is a multi-complex building in front of us. There's a multi-complex family building to the right of us. So our building is not going to obstruct any of the views of anybody. And so I just wanted you to consider that we will have a more option, but I'm not sure what we're going to do. Then another opposition I saw was from the owner who is right next to us. Obviously has the same concerns as we had, because when we bought this land, when the land was coming, then the multi-complex building was coming, we thought that our land values go down. I'm sure you will have the same feeling. We are not going to do anything to hurt their value. We are going to make sure that we follow the rules. We also make sure that whatever the building comes, it is pretty and small, not very big like Alexa.
Thank you. Do you have any opposition to tabling this to determine if there's a different land use other than?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Are there any questions, or any comments for the applicant from council? From commission? Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other comments from the applicant? All right, public comment portion, please. If you will, state your name and address for the commission.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Strong. I live at 4843 Ocean Drive, which is directly across from the property that's being proposed for rezoning. Since I've lived in Corpus Christi, which has been 46 years, it's always the airline intersection to Ocean Drive was what separated multifamily use and mixed use from single-family homes. So if you drive down Ocean Drive and pass airline, every piece of property there is a single-family home. There's no rental properties, there's no multi-use properties. And it has made, for beautiful living conditions for the people there. We purchased our home with the idea that we were buying in a single-family home area. And we recognize that there are the very large apartment complex now across airline from us, and the Alexa going in. I can attest to the traffic problems that are already existing. You've got an apartment complex that has no facility for pulling in a moving van. So anybody that's moving in and out of the current property that's already there and open, they have to park on the street, right at the curb, right at the turn off of Ocean Drive onto Airline, and it does create a traffic problem. They block that. There's no way to get a moving van onto the property. So I'm sure that Alexa's going to have the same problem. So I can't foresee that it would be advantageous at all to put a new zoning there, and I understand that the property owner can state that he wants to do something small. But if you change the zoning, then he sells that property, then the next person who comes along may push the limits on that one. And we don't want to look at any more multifamily than we're already looking at with transitory rentals, no private ownership. So I am certainly opposed to seeing the zoning change.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mo Motaki, and I live at 2921 Ocean Drive in Corpus Christi, Texas. I own the adjacent property that they are planning to build an apartment complex. When I bought this property, I understood that the zoning was a single family. And I really strongly feel like we should not change the zoning. I'm sure every one of you are living in a comfortable environment in the neighborhood. What happens if somebody comes in and changes zoning in yours and try to build an apartment? I don't think that's the right thing to do. And I strongly oppose changing the zoning from single family, because I bought that. I spent a lot of money buying that single family property. I don't think it should be allowed for an apartment complex to build right beside me. And then tomorrow, if I have a pool, every one of those neighborhoods right there beside me, they're going to look in my backyard. So I urge you to please not to allow this zone changing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Gene Guernsey. I'm a local real estate broker. I reside at 340 Grant Place, 78411. I'm a native of Corpus Christi, born and raised here. Been in the real estate business for nearly 40 years now. I know I look a lot younger than that, but I've been in the business for a long time. And I've been very blessed to have sold a lot of real estate in this particular area. Matter of fact, the subject property, Airline and Ocean Drive, the property to the left of it, I sold about a decade ago to a developer who'd done a lot of development work in Florida, Nevada, in Virginia, et cetera. And he bought it with the intention of it being multifamily zoned, and he bought it with the intention of someday being able to resell it at a profit. He's a wise guy. Next to that, the land that the Flato family owns, some of you may remember the old Beach Club apartments there, I brokered that land to the current apartment communities being built there. It too is zoned multifamily. It's been zoned multifamily for a long, long time. Matter of fact, from Airline and Ocean Drive all the way down to about Aberdeen or about Ocean View, all of that on the water side is zoned apartment tourist district. It's the land to build apartments on, to build condos, townhomes, high rises, if you will. That's the land that was zoned for that, and it was zoned many, many years ago. The land from this intersection going towards the university, going towards the old Ship Ahoy, all of that's zoned residential. Now, I got a chance to actually talk with the heirs of the folks that own the land. The Jones family owned that land as farmland, and it was their vision to have estate homes along the bay from Airline that direction. The land the other direction is set for apartments. There's land available. I have 3.5 acres of land for sale that's apartment tourist zoned down the way, down Ocean Drive. I've had it for sale for almost 3 years. We've had multiple offers, but they haven't worked out. So there's land to do apartments now. It's not jumping off the shelf necessarily. So it's unfair, and it's unfortunate that maybe the current owners got some bad advice as they bought this property, because they bought it really well. I mean, it's perceived to be a fantastic deal at their purchase price that year. The land nearby, same size, sold for $100,000 to $220,000 more for the same size land within the last 5-year period. That's a huge difference. So the perceived great deal was because it's next to multifamily zoning, because there could someday be an apartment community. Now the reality, or the thought maybe it was never going to come, but the reality is here. They're building apartments next to it. To move that domino to the next lot owner is unfair. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Robert Oshman. I bought a house at 4728 Ocean Drive. You can see where it is on your map. I did not receive a notice. I am registered under the city, Nueces County Tax Assessor, as the owner of that house. But that's not really what it is. I really admire what Mr. Gersney said. Our forefathers, the people who developed this land, who had this land, who owned this land, they didn't plan on apartments being on this property. As he said, from Airline on would be nice estates, nice homes, people that from out of the city, from anyone, people could enjoy. Not only people living there, people coming down. Ocean Drive is one of our centerpieces. You know, people come, when they come from San Antonio or Houston, they drive down Ocean Drive to see it. Right now it's not too pretty because it's all being torn up. But when it is clean, it's beautiful. And this is what people do. When you go to different cities on other parts of the world, you go down to different places to see pretty things. The fact that Airline and Ocean Drive is as congested as it is now is a real problem. And to allow the possibility of having further enhanced traffic there is going to be impossible. It's not only unsafe for drivers, it's unsafe for pedestrians, it's unsafe for cyclists, it's unsafe for joggers, it's unsafe for people who just want to walk. I really think it was meant for residential, and it should remain residential. It shouldn't be changed. It's not it's an ideal place for residential, even though it's too close to that Alexa, it's too close to the commercial property, but that's an unfortunate situation. We've all made bad investments in our life, unfortunately. I've made tremendously bad investments in my life. It hasn't killed me, but I'm still here. But I don't want to see a change. It's for the betterment of the community is what it is.
And just to your point, Andrew, can he still fill out a card if he has proof that he owns the lot that's within the 200?
I did fill out one.
Did you?
I filled out one, and I put my own name on it with my property name on it, and I sent it in on Monday.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
One other thing about that, I will make a comment on that. This is an unfortunate situation. If you look at your site planning up there, There are only 7 properties that will receive a notice for this piece of property. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I would best to say that 6 out of those 7 will vote against it.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak on item 8?
My name is Burke Strong. I live at 4843 Ocean Drive, 78411. The previous lady was my spouse, or is my spouse. And I'm not going to try to repeat what she said, but I've spoken with the other property owners at 4700 Ocean Drive, and I think there are 4 of us circled up there, and we're all against the zoning change for the reasons that have already been spoken. And I won't repeat that, so thank you very much. But we're 4 property owners in that circle against it.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Albert Kessler. I live at 4811 Ocean Drive. I'm actually in the corner across the street from this property and did not receive a notice for clarification. And I think that anytime you're going to send a notice out for a zoning change, it ought to go a little further than 200 feet. I strongly oppose the zoning change, and I'm not going to repeat for the reason why. Everybody has clearly done a very good job doing that. Thank you.
Have you received any kind of letter from Mr. Demas?
Excuse me?
You can still receive a notice and submit it, I believe. Is that correct, Andrew? So if you want to coordinate with Mr. Demas, he can get you a letter to sign so you can actually file it if you like.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Marty Davis. I live at 4829 Ocean Drive. I'm probably 200 feet from the subject property. If you look at the division on Airline, everything basically east of Airline is all residential. Everything west is predominantly commercial. When we bought in this area, it was because it was residential. And we didn't ever think anybody would try to buy residential property and then convert it to commercial property so they could put money in their pocket. They bought it as residential. It should remain as residential. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Any other comments at this time for item 8? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion. Any other comments for staff at this time regarding this item? Commissioner Miller.
I'm just curious, did the property owners at the Alexa just check opposed, or did they write anything in a statement?
They actually wrote that they feel it would decrease their property value, which I'm not sure what study they were looking at, but there's no study that's ever said that zoning decreases property values.
That's interesting. Okay.
It's a nice word for it, yes.
Commissioner Schrader.
I'm going to offer an observation to both the applicant and the public that's here posed to that. You've got an interesting dilemma here because the development that the multifamily development that's already underway is creating a unique situation on this line. It's a very hard line, and I think everybody who's spoken here has generally spoken in favor of reinforcing that hard line. As an architect, what you really want is a softer line. There's the potential here, if there were something built on that property that was something other than heavy multifamily or single family, that might soften that line just from the pure and simple fact that when you get up to the elevation that development is creating, there's the top level apartments, they're going to be able to look in backyards 4 houses down, 5 houses down. So if you were able to come up with a way to, and I don't know what it is, and it's not really it's a subtle thing, but something that was developed there that was 2 to 3 stories max, it starts to help break that down and to make fewer opportunities to look in other backyards. Now, don't know whether that helps or doesn't help, but when you've got 5 stories up against whatever the next property is, whether it's single family or not, it's really dramatically affecting all of those properties 6 and 7 lots down. So you might just keep that in mind, because that's the situation you've got. And this particular lot, if you all are able to work amongst yourselves with the applicants and find a way to strategize on something, you might all benefit from something else, from some other strategy there. So that's just something to consider as you're thinking about what's in the best interest of all of the residents in that area, because as it's now, and as many people alluded to that it's always been, it's a very hard line. And it's not terribly desirable, I don't think, to many of you that are not immediately adjacent, but even 4 and 5 lots down. So it's just something to consider.
Any other questions at this time for staff or the good of the commission? If not, we will entertain a motion to approve, deny, table, or otherwise. Oh, Commissioner Dillard, did you have a question? Sorry.
No, I was.
Okay.
Commissioner Miller, I move that we table this to allow the applicant to work with some of the neighboring properties to come up with something that is more appropriate for the area.
Do you have a date in mind? There's a December 8th, or there was a November 10th?
December 8th.
Thank you. I have a motion to table to December 8th. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes for the table. Moving on to item 11. Mr. Demas. Everything is just kicking it down.
Alrighty, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, our next zoning case is WH&CM Holdings LLC, case 1021-07. This is a little bit unique as far as it is an existing special permit that was approved last year, and they're asking for a 24-month time extension of that special permit. So here's an aerial view of the subject property. If you recall, since it wasn't too long ago, it was a proposed RV use that was to come in with a maximum capacity of 160 RV stalls. As you can see, the property again is located on State Highway 361 on Mustang Island. There are no buffer yards required between the RMAT and RV district. There are, of course, setbacks, landscaping screening requirements, and there are specific requirements when it comes to RV uses as far as what are types of accessory uses they can have. Maximum stay is 6 months that you can be on site before you do have to leave the property. It cannot be a permanent resident. Now, when it comes to notices, of the 67 notices we sent out, and I can say that the addresses worked on this one because we got plenty in return. We had 34 in opposition, which is roughly 18%. All are from the same property owner to the north. Now, here are the quick conditions of the original ordinance. Again, there was a maximum density established of 8 sites per acre, which roughly totals 160 units maximum. There was a buffer yard instituted of 30 feet with a 7-foot solid wooden screening fence along the southern property line that's shared with it. So if you know Mustang Island, that is shared with La Concha Estates to the south. The limitations are that there must be a paved with concrete or concrete tile pavers for each of those stall sites, so these cannot be some type of loose substrate. It cannot just be directly on the sand. It does have to be an improved surface. We have our standard lighting requirements that you must contain all light on the subject property. It also caps the height of those fixtures. Stacking was an important issue, especially because in the event of a hurricane evacuation, we wanted to make sure you had folks that could get in, and of course, in those evacuation scenarios, folks can get out. So this requires the minimum stacking of 6 off-street vehicle stacking spaces, which roughly equates to 3 RVs. When you start adding up your average size car, you can stack 3 RVs in that area. And then lastly, we have our, what I like to call our catch-all, which means a special permit does not give you a get-out-of-jail-free card. You have to meet all the other requirements of the UDC, building codes, fire codes, et cetera. And then lastly, that is why we are here tonight. It is capped at 12 months, which is coming up in March. So the applicant is asking to extend that another 24 months. Originally asked for 12, and I thought it'd be better to ask for 24, since you never know with our supply chain issues, with cost of materials. I've always advocated that our applicants ask for more time, because usually when you think you have everything figured out, something inevitably will happen. This, of course, adds to time for things like beachfront construction certificates, anything they have to resolve with the General Land Office, which is never a quick process, especially dealing with the Army Corps. That does take time. So that is another reason staff recommended yes to a 24-month time extension on this special permit. None of the other conditions will be changing. Everything else is staying verbatim as it was originally approved by council back in March.
Thank you. Commissioner York.
Thank you. As far as staff's aware, is this moving forward? Like you said,
Yes.
are they going to the GLO, that kind of stuff?
Yes, that is absolutely moving forward. Their grading plan, I believe, is underway as we speak.
Awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? All right, at this time, we'll open the public hearing for comment for item 11. Anyone wishing to speak?
Good evening, Commissioner, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and Commissioners. My name is Stephen Giovannini. I'm the attorney, and I represent the person that is opposed, that put in all those oppositions, Sherry and Carl Badlich, that live at 102 West Palm Beach. And they actually own more lots than they were notified for. They couldn't put oppositions for because they own a couple lots that were out of the ring. But they're opposed to an extension because they think, I don't know if they were here previously on the, when this thing was approved, but they're opposed to an RV park there. They don't know anything about it. They don't know about the restrictions, about the zoning, about how it will be run, the restrictions on it, and they think it will have a big effect on their area, on the lots they own. They bought it for a certain purpose, to sell the lots, not as an RV park right there next to it. So I don't know if they've been in touch with the people that are trying to build the RV park, but maybe at this point, without any knowledge about it, they're opposed to it, and they're just asking the commission not to give them an extra 12 months to do what they're trying to do, because they think it'll have a long-term, forever impact on the area. It'll have an impact on evacuation routes, like Andrew said. So they'd like the commission to seriously consider that, the Planning Commission. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments at this time? Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My voice. Alex Harris, 2138 Highway 286, Corpus Christi. You've seen me before up here. I'm here. The owners of the property is Mr. Willard Hammonds and Mr. Charles Miller. The previous purchasers of the property failed to close on it, and when they failed to close, the property came back available. Mr. Hammonds and Mr. Miller stepped up, purchased the property, cash transaction. They looked at all of the data and all of the information. I have a title company. We went through all the zoning. We went through every legal aspect of it, and they're willing to accept the conditions. We immediately contacted the city manager and the staff. We wanted to go through seeing there's this piece of city property in there. It's got some issues with it. And so the previous developer showed that they were digging a big tank on it. So I asked Peter, are you aware they're going to dig a tank? And he goes, how are they going to dig a tank on our property? So there were some issues that we wanted to work on with the city to make a better development. I had a call from Mr. Batlich. I said, do you have any questions? Do you have any issues? No. Mr. Hammonds had a call from Mr. Batlich. Mr. Batlich, do you have any questions or anything? No, we don't have any question about it. So he had an opportunity to tell us if he was opposed to it, and he did not. What we're asking for is to not change the special permit in any way, just give us additional time, 24 months. I'm a developer builder. It takes, right now we're ordering, and most of you know, your air conditioners and everything else, you're ordering them 6 months out. Your windows, you're ordering, 10 weeks, 12 weeks out. So there's a lot of things with this property. We want it to be a very successful property. Mr. Hammonds owns a approximately 44-foot RV. He travels all over the United States and stays in very high-end, beautiful RV parks. My RV is only 24 feet long. It's not quite the size. And we travel throughout the United States. We've been down in Big Bend, going to North Carolina and other areas, looking to make sure that this isn't just a RV park. This is a one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art RV park. So I ask that you give us a 24-month extension on this special permit.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Gene Guernsey. I live at 340 Grant Place, 78411. I'm a real estate broker, been at it a long time now. There's an absolute demand for this as values on Padre Island and Mustang Island continue going through the roof. There's folks that want to experience the area, they want to come here and they want to try it out, and then they may invest and may buy here someday. I've had all this land for sale in Flower Bluff for several years. Fortunately, it sold recently, but I had so many phone calls of people wanting to put RV parks in on that land. Now, it was not appropriate land for RV parks. This land is absolutely perfect for it, with the beach access, with Port Aransas up the road, North Padre the other way. It's an ideal place for it, and there's a huge demand for it. Now, I'm going kicking and screaming. My wife wants me to buy an RV and wants me to start traveling. I'm like, honey, I'm only 60 years old. I'm not ready for that yet. But there's a lot of people that really do enjoy it. As a matter of fact, in this new bohemian society that we live in, there's a lot of young professionals that are RVing and going to work every day like this. And they would enjoy yet another park there. So simply granting an extension of the process, I think would be very helpful for them to do their due diligence and work through it and decide that this is in fact a good business venture. Knowing these guys as I've known them for 30 years, they'll do it if it's a good business venture. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the public at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Commissioner Miller, do you have a comment?
I just have a question. Mr. Harris and Mr. Guernsey, are either of you representing the applicant in any capacity?
Yes. I am. Mr. Hammonds has been my investor in 8 or 10 projects, so I step in as a developer for him. We joint venture it together. So both Mr. Hammonds and Mr. Miller, Charles Miller, are going to own the property. I will come in and probably do the improvements for them. I'll build whatever things they want me to build. If you notice on that, there are a lot of lots along facing the ocean. Okay, so those would be single-family homes, multifamily homes. That's my specialty.
But the previous applicant that came before this board and with the big dog and pony show and all the pretty pictures, he's gone?
Yes. He did not close on the property. He was not able to actually secure his financing. His time ran out. And then that's when we were contacted by the real estate agent and the seller of the property to see if we were interested in purchasing it.
And it's the current applicants or the current landowners' intentions to develop this property themselves, or are they still trying to sell it?
Oh, no, we're going to develop it. We're going to develop it, Mr. Hammonds and Mr. Miller and myself. We will be the 3 in there. And then a young man who works for me, Craig Kerr, who's really boots on the ground. He's on the job site 7 days a week.
Okay,
But yes.
great. That addresses all my questions.
Yeah, we'll be the ones.
Thank you. Any other questions for Commissioner Zarguni?
I have a question for
Yes, please. Thank you, sir.
Andrew.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. The special permit issue, I mean, usually we grant the applicant 12 months, right? And while I do understand that supply chain, COVID issues for right now it's an issue. However, my question is that granting a 24 months to the applicant for this project, that would kind of set the tone for other project and other applicants coming in, and if they're in the similar situations, and we have to do that. And obviously, I'm hoping that COVID doesn't last forever, or supply chain things like that come back to some sort of a normality. But my personal issue about this is that granting this 24 months to the applicant, because it sets the tone for other applicants as well, because we want to create this sort of a transparency. Again, I totally understand the issues that every developer and builder is going through. However, I feel that for what we sit here and making the decisions, we need to create that opportunity that is for everyone. So is there some maybe more definite planning from the applicant that they can really look at their timing and figure out making some kind of a sort of a special exception on this project? Because I'm afraid that, again, I'm speaking for myself, but again, I have a lot of respect for the applicant. I have no doubt that they will get the job done. I know them. But personally, I just think giving the 24 months, what happened tomorrow if we have another applicant? Are we going to give him a 24-month extension? So, I mean, where are we at?
And that's a fair point. So when it comes to PUDs, we automatically almost give them 24 months because PUDs take that extra amount of engineering. When it comes to special permits, the reason that I prefer to bring them in on a case-by-case basis is this very reason. The commission gets to decide whether or not an extension should be viable, hearing the speech of the applicant and what their plan is. So rather than restructuring special permits today to automatically give them 24 months, keeping the 12 months kind of puts the fire under them. Now, in this scenario, because it's going to incorporate so many other factors like beachfront construction certificates, it's not your standard PUD or your standard SP for, I don't want jinx car washes, but it's not like a car wash where they're going to come in tomorrow with a permit. This one takes a little bit longer because anytime you're developing on the beach, you never know what the Army Corps is going to throw at you. And in some cases, that's an 18-month process. So that's why I thought 24 months was a little more appropriate, because the last thing I want is you give them 12 months and we're back here in 12 months and we're doing it again. So giving them that extra bit of time, just like plat extensions, moving to more of 12 months.
Where I'm coming from.
Yes,
because
sir. Completely understand.
I've had several situations with special permits, and I'm really not in favor of giving just a 24 months grant just because of current situation. That's just my take on it.
Commissioner Schrader.
Well, I guess I would like to respond to a little bit to Commissioner Zarguni's position on that, in that, I mean, Mr. Demas confirmed earlier that the documents and the project is underway. The applicant indicated that there was a transition in essentially developer, but yet the project remains on track for this, and that those documents are in process. So I think there's potential for some misconstruing. That the intention of extension is not to re-evaluate whether this was the appropriate development choice for this and zoning for this, but to make sure that the process that it was zoned for remains in process and underway, and it is not that the applicant is not delaying their own process. So I just want to make sure that point was made with respect to that, because I do think it's what we're not doing in these evaluating these extensions is reconsidering the purpose of the special permit.
Great, thank you. Any other comments for the staff? If not, we will entertain a motion, please.
Are we on 11? I make a motion that we approve, we're item 11, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Item 11 as presented by staff.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to item 12 and 13.
I will go as quickly as possible. The short version, as they said in Spaceballs. Cedar Grove, Block 3, Lot 5R. This is a question about a replat and, of course, our favorite sidewalk construction plat waivers. This is tied to both items 12 and 13, as Mr. Chair alluded to. Cedar Grove, Block 3, Lot 5R, replat of 3.335 acres. So here on the vicinity map, this is roughly west of the intersection of Greenwood Road and Holly Road. The property is zone heavy industrial. As you can see by the yellow lines, that they are just short of where the sidewalk would continue across the adjoining property to the subject property highlighted in yellow. So of course, we have the normal slides talking about the plat requirements of when they would apply for such a waiver, what are the conditions we would look at. Of course, as being on a secondary arterial, there is a requirement for a 5-foot sidewalk in front of the subject property. Luckily, this is not a scenario where they're a mile away from another sidewalk. It's within a stone's throw of connecting. Now, when it comes to industrial districts, there are specific provisions that come into play involving the design of the sidewalks, involving the width, and again, when it comes to streets that are specifically on the urban transportation plan as arterials. Now, here's a view of the subject property looking to the west, and one more from the east, and just in front of the subject site. And here is a view of the plat that was submitted for this particular property. And now here are the points, the $1 million slide, as I like to call it. The factors in favor of granting the waiver, of course, is that you do have a gap to the adjoining property that has already been platted. So it would take some negotiation to get them to install that sidewalk, and they would have to be agreeable to bridging that gap. It would involve allowing a major portion that has already been completed to make sure that it is up to standard. Now, factors that are against the sidewalk waiver is that it is a larger arterial street, which is, again, a requirement. The area is zone heavy industrial. You typically don't have too many sidewalks that are along your industrial areas for pedestrians. This is not a site that is particularly different from any of the surrounding sites, that there is a special exception. And then lastly, there is an established sidewalk network along Holly Road nearby, but does not connect. So it's, we're kind of a rock in a hard place, that we're just next to the connecting to the network. There is going to be that one lot of a gap, but the fact that the existing network exists along the entirety of Greenwood is a pretty good reason to allow this sidewalk network to continue, even though we do have that gap, and that gap hopefully will be bridged soon enough. But this is an opportunity to let that network continue. And of course, lastly, we are recommending denial of the sidewalk waiver. We do want them to build the sidewalk in this scenario. I can feel Commissioner York already saying about cash in lieu of. We're working on it. We haven't forgotten about it for this exact situation. But the Planning Commission has the opportunity to, of course, agree with staff's recommendation or choose to grant the waiver. And I'm be
Thank
happy
you.
to address any questions.
Questions for staff, Commissioner Zarguni? Did you have a question? Commissioner York?
I was actually going to bring up cash in lieu of again, just to do it. But also, I won't now. Every point they had in favor of is basically a deferment agreement. Were they not aware that that exists, or because they're saying they're going to build it, they really should be doing a deferment agreement? So
Yes, they're aware it exists.
and they're still trying to do this instead.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's Plan B.
Right.
Commissioner Miller?
As I was going to say,
Why are we here? I know.
Okay, at this time, any other questions for staff? If not, I will open the public hearing for comment. Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, entertain a motion or further discussion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the plat but deny the sidewalk waiver.
I'll second that motion.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to item 14.
Okay, so fortunately, on item 14, you have already seen this presentation, so again, I will breeze through it. Last Planning Commission was the briefing on the upcoming state mandates. As you know, there's two big factors that were at play. The first one was Senate Bill 1585. This is about City Council determining which body should hear potential landmark designations, either the Planning Commission or the Landmark Commission. Of course, it's more than likely going to be the Landmark Commission. That would be the logical choice. Not that we don't value your input and opinions on historic designations, but it also helps streamline the process. It's one less board that we have to go before. Additionally, if a property owner is opposed to a rezoning or an inclusion, I should say, into a historic district, the City Council would have to garner a 3/4 vote of approval to overturn that opposition. That would also occur at the Landmark Commission level. These, of course, are the various checkboxes that have to be amended within the UDC that simply strike Planning Commission as one of the bodies that would give a recommendation on the potential designation. And then getting down to the staff review section, this is where it talks about inclusion of the owner's property into a historic district rather than specifically a historic designation, which there is a difference between district versus specific site designation. And then moving right along, it's again calling out Landmark Commission as the specific body to do the review, and then striking the Planning Commission section. The next is House Bill 1475. This has everything to do with the Board of Adjustment when considering hardships for variance to a structure, not in any other instance, but specifically to structures. So the new bill is now incorporating the potentiality of a financial issue as a motivating reason. So that line is being struck from insufficient findings. This is the new language that is coming straight out of the statute, so it's almost verbatim from what the statute that passed. And it's talking about whenever the financial cost of compliance is greater than 50%. So in the time that we had between the two sessions, I came up with a couple examples. Of course, we're recommending approval of the text amendments. Here's one scenario where we had an issue, and in fact, this house is coming in for permit right now. The existing foundation, as you can see on the backside, I know it's a little grainy, the backside of the property is a pretty steep ravine. As you can know, the Calallen-Annaville area is known for its hills and valleys, and this is one of those scenarios where the house was built towards the street and almost at the most level portion of the property, but the existing foundation was encroaching into that front yard setback. The Board of Adjustment granted them approval to continue the encroachment because if they demolish the home, they would have to meet setbacks, which of course now shrinks the size of the house. Shrinking the size of the house does reduce its value, does compromise its appraised value. Therefore, this is one of the scenarios in which it gives the Board of Adjustment another reason to say yes rather than another reason to say no. It gives this homeowner a chance to reuse the existing foundation and build a new home on top of it. Scenario number two would be loss of the site of more than 25%. This particular property, if you know Padre Island, there's a rough road called Sand Dollar that's on what I like to call the old part of the Packery Channel area. It's not the widest street, but there is a large portion of property that was purchased by the Audubon Society, which there is a paper street that was never built. This property is adjacent to this paper street, but whenever you have, regardless of a street is built or not, you have to meet the same street yard setbacks established in the UDC. That would have required a 25-foot setback from the front, which you do see on the site plan, and then an additional 25% setback to a street that'll never be built because it's now part of a bird reserve. So that variance would allow them to expand the structure on an area that they normally wouldn't be able to, and it was pretty close to 25% of the property that was going to be unbuildable for no reason other than they're next to a paper street. So that's another reason why we're including this language, not just to meet the state requirements that were passed by the legislature, but it does give opportunities for homeowners especially, not only to build on a little bit more of their property, but especially in those scenarios where they're just odd properties, and we try to find ways of making them work to be that facilitator of getting them to build the home that they desire. But that, in a nutshell, is a recap of what we went over last Planning Commission, and the text amendments that'll be going to the UDC and moving on to City Council. But again, we as staff are recommending approval to be in line with the most recent legislative cycle.
Thank you. Any questions for staff regarding this item? Seeing none, I believe it's on the public hearing portion. I will open the public hearing at this, it's part of it. Public hearing at this time. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. You are looking for a motion to approve, is that correct? As
Yes, a
presented?
recommendation of approval,
Thank you.
please.
Do I have a motion to approve or otherwise?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the item.
Second.
A motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, at this time, Andrew, how long is your training session? Not that we haven't had a long night, but is it 30 minutes or is it like?
You know, it's 21, well, not counting the question slide, it's about 20 slides. I know everyone's tired, so the point of training is to really catch you when you're at your best and you're in your prime. And I know long zoning cases have a way of drawing that out of you.
And to that point, I know you said the next session or the next commission meeting, there's only one zoning case.
Yes,
Can
there's
we
only
move that one? Can
That's
we
why I
move
was
the
kind
training
of
to?
winking at Commissioner Miller. I'm like, push him to December because that way it
makes
gives
it
an
short.
opportunity to do this training session at the next planning commission, and then the zoning 101, we can play with a date in December.
At this time, I would like to make a motion that we table and move that to the next planning commission meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, moving on to director's report, please.
I can't oppose that.
You can, please do so. I didn't say it, but you're right, my bad, sorry.
Good
Director's
evening.
report, please.
Nina Nixon Mendez. I just wanted to announce that our next Development Services Task Force meeting will be on November the 19th. And again, it will be at the Clayburgh Bank at 5350 South Staples at the Staples Community Room.
Thank you for that.
I've got a quick question. I noticed, this is kind of separate, but the review of the building code group, I noticed a lot of those were canceled. Do you know if that has been, something's changed with that?
I don't have information on that this evening, but I can certainly email something to the commission related to
Okay, I was
any
just mostly curious because
postponements
I'm
or-
getting the task force
Mhm.
ones confused with the building code reviews that are getting
Yes, sir.
canceled. So I'm not sure what's on and what's off, I guess.
All right, I'll be sure to get an update to y'all.
Commissioner Dibble.
Yes, sir.
Can you hit that? Okay,
Sorry. In those development task force meeting, I know I've been to some of them where they talk about, different things, maybe a different electrical or a different building code, but I'm getting a lot of feedback from the building community regarding service levels from development services in terms of being able to call and actually get somebody to answer the phone. Trouble getting inspections in a timely basis. Things like the city requiring the builders to submit electronic permits, yet the inspectors can't do things electronically. And then you go to a job site and the plan gets wet because they make the builders keep them outside, and it's just more expense item. And it seems like, the fees keep going up, but the service level stays where it is, or seems to be getting worse. And I guess, is there ever discussion in those meetings regarding, what the service standards are, what's coming? Because I'm getting a lot of complaints.
Yeah. We do entertain requests from individuals on certain topics, and so we're glad to present at those on those topics at the task force meeting. And you're right, our service levels, we of course always want to improve our service levels, especially since we've had the fee increase. Our director has made it clear that we are going to need to enhance our performance. We do report out at the Development Services Task Force what our performance measures are during the meeting, and give time for opportunity and question and answer. But we do want to strive to improve those. But I'll certainly, convey your concerns to.
And I think a lot of, what could be done to diffuse it is, again, I don't think anybody in the development community or building community minds paying more fees as long as the service gets better. So I don't know if in maybe one of these meetings, y'all have a roadmap laid out that says, hey, here's maybe here's what we're striving for, or here's some enhancements that maybe we're working on. I'm sure there's a plan there, but I think it might be good to tell that story.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Commissioner York.
For what it's worth, I call development services quite often, and I don't want to jinx it, but, answer the phone. I call Andrew actually a lot, and one time he even answered before the first ring, so that was very good service.
Thank you for the comment. Commissioner Zarguni?
I just want to clarify on one thing regarding the special permit things.
Yes, sir.
My point was, just to clarify, it is that, like that previous applicant, when they came and proposed this project, came all fancy, proposed all these visuals and all that stuff, and at the end of the day, it didn't work out, right? Nothing against any particular applicant or group, but what if in 24 months that project doesn't get finished? Are they going to come back and extend for some sort of a extension?
It's kind of, the way I look at it, it's like the plat time extensions. If I see forward progress, then I'm more apt to want to help the applicant and defend and facilitate that extension. If they're coming in at the last minute and scrambling, it's kind of like when we all were in school, and you can tell who studied for the test the night before versus who did a little bit of studying every night or worked on the paper, not the night before it's due. And those are the things that we do look at as staff, is what type of forward momentum were they encountering, and what type of issues do they foresee. So whenever I encounter anything with the GLO or the Army Corps, I usually want to give them a little bit more breathing room, because it's just, I've learned the hard way too many times, and I don't ever want it to come back on the city to say that we didn't do everything possible to try to get the project to work.
Anything else for the good of the commission or any other comments? If not, we will adjourn as the planning commission and convene as the airport zoning commission. Andrew, can we have roll call, please?
Sure.
No, I'm sorry, Catherine.
That's okay. Chairman Bach.
Here.
Vice Chairman Dibble.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner Zarguni.
Here.
Commissioner Miller. Commissioner York.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Mandel is absent, and Commissioner Salazar Garza.
Here.
Quorum established.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the public other than anything written? Is there any comments that you have, Andrew? Seeing
No
none, we will
comments were
close the
received.
public hearing. Thank you. Approval of absences. Do I have a motion to approve the absences?
Mr. Commissioner Miller, I have a question before I make a motion. Is
Please.
that okay?
Thank you.
I know Commissioner Mandel continues to be absent, and I'm very sympathetic as a father myself to any issues that would come up with one of my children. But at the end of the day, we have a seat that's continues to be empty, and there's nothing that keeps him from applying again at a later date when another opening shows up. But I'm going to recommend approving Commissioner Schrader's absence and denying Commissioner Mandel's. But from a legal standpoint, I know when you're appointed to the Planning Commission and you de facto get appointed to the Airport Zoning Commission at the same time, if you term out based on absences for the Planning Commission, does it automatically apply to the Airport Zoning Commission as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we don't have to keep score on either board? Okay.
And did you mention, Catherine, that he has maybe next week or next meeting? Perfect. So there might be a meeting next week that he comes, or 2 weeks now that he comes to, our next meeting.
Okay. Well, again, my position remains the same at this point, so I'm going to make a motion that we not approve Commissioner Mandel's absence and approve the absences of Commissioner Salazar Garza and Schrader.
Or Gonzalez and Schrader.
Is that what it says? Oh, sorry. Gonzalez and Schrader.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? A second?
What, I guess I would like to ask a question, clarification. So if his absence is not approved, what happens?
It will count against the, so if I recall the rules of the city secretary, you can only miss up to 25% of called meetings. At that point, I think you exceed and you're automatically removed from that particular board.
Which is 26 of our meetings, so you can miss up to 8 or so, 7 or 8. Oh, every 1 a month. What?
I think it still counts for that planning commission that it's attached to, unless it's a separately called airport zoning commission, I believe is how we would look at it. It's a good one.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to review on what qualifies for the 25% threshold.
That's true. If we only meet quarterly, that's just one.
Sure. I have a motion to approve Gonzalez and Schrader and not Mandel. Do I have a second? No second. The motion does not carry. Do I have another motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve to excuse all the absences.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of minutes from the last meeting. Any questions for staff? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I will make the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On to the briefing.
Okay, it's only 10 slides, so I will go through quickly. I know everybody's tired. Really, the point of today was that there are new ACUS maps. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this. Lieutenant Pollock was here not too long ago to talk about the new 2020 maps. Again, this only affects, and I won't go through the pomp and circumstance of it, but the point of ACUS, of course, is to protect land uses that are compatible with, as you've seen, various zoning cases that have come across, whether it's in or adjacent to ACUS, we take a very serious look at the surrounding land uses. We had, I think, a stables case not too long ago that was near the airport, and it was a perfect opportunity to downgrade the zoning from single family to FR to allow the stable use, but to take the option off the table for more single family homes. We've had cases near the Walmart in Flower Bluff where it was just such a high density of potential apartments that even though it wasn't in the ACUS, but that difference of just a couple of 100 feet does matter. So at the end of the day, the purpose of ACUS is to protect the Navy's mission. But as we've learned from even news stories of what's happening in Fort Worth, it's to protect the lives of the folks that live around it that may or may not be involved with the military by any circumstance. So the two fields that were studied on the most recent update for 2020 were Cabanus, which is the only multi-engine training field in the United States. So it is extremely important not only to the Coastal Bend, but to the Navy as a whole. And you have folks that are members of not just the Navy, but Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and the Air Force training at that site. So these pilots are going into all divisions and branches of the military. The second is Waldron, which even though it's a smaller field, it is still used for both instrument and visual touch and go landings. And it's also part of your more long-range training. So the couple of fields that you don't see mentioned on here is roughly about 60% of the flights that come out of CC International are government-related. Some of them are very much touch-and-go trainings. And then Goliad, which is far to the north, is for your long-range training mission. So they are looping from all of these sites and still through Waldron Field, even though it's the quote-unquote quieter field. Now, changes to the map. What this map is to show, as you can see, the bold lines are the old ACUS boundaries for Cabanus and Waldron. The shaded in, highlighted areas are the new maps. So in some instances, these maps very much grew, these boundaries, but in other instances, as you can see on those properties south of FM 43 on the left-hand side of the screen, they were able to actually shrink and move closer to FM 43. So there are, of course, good things and bad things. It's a double-edged sword where we do have to readjust and now take a hard look of if we want to take a stance, and of course with this commission's endorsement, things like city-initiated rezoning. So that's very much on the horizon. I think that's going to be a serious issue we need to tackle in 2022. These briefings are the idea of laying the groundwork for that so you don't feel like you're completely lost in the woods when we start to bring some of these cases forward. We're going to start that with a very small step of a simple text amendment, which is at the end of this presentation, which I'm going to bring to the Planning Commission at the next hearing, of where we can just add using these maps, these updated maps, within the UDC to make judgment calls when it comes to rezonings. Right now, the language is a little vague, and we see an opportunity to just simply start with a cleanup, make it crystal clear. So again, this map is just to show where those boundaries are changing, and I can always email you the full packet if you're ever bored. It's 90 pages thick. It's a good read, but it's everything you'll ever want to know about not only just the patterns, but the aircraft, the actual patterns they will use, noise attenuation, which is the next couple of maps, shows in some instances the before and after. Cabinets Field actually shrunk and the noise impact it has to surrounding properties. But the difference is, well, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, those high decibel readings of 65 decibels and up, and usually it's about the 85 decibel range when you start really having to worry, are all within the confines of Cabinets Field, but that doesn't mean all sound stays. So very much like we had the discussion about the car wash, you can attenuate noise and you can absolutely get it down to bearable levels, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be completely silent. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes having that situational awareness of knowing that aircraft is overhead helps us make other land use decisions as far as when folks erect cranes and make any other type of major construction of creating dust or other noise that could impact the Navy's mission. So noise is one of those factors. This gradient map on the left-hand side is just to show that there are still some low 30 to 40 decibel range, which is even less than the sound of your air conditioned compressor. That's about 60 decibels, what you have right outside most of our windows in our homes. So those cool blues are just to show that, yes, there is noise, can never have completely silence. It is a far greater impact on the Waldron area. So that is why when we take a hard look at rezonings, we can't just think of, is a plane going to fly overhead, but what is the noise impact? If it gets to a point that it's such in those yellows and red areas, that's when you actually have to start making changes to the building code as far as types of windows, types of structure, types of siding, and now insulation to try to deaden some of that noise from getting into the envelope of the single-family home. Now, what are the next steps? As I mentioned, we're going to start with a text amendment. We're going to take a look at which are the guidelines used for rezoning requests. And of course, we have our compatible districts, which I think we've seen now a little bit more uptick in the cases. If you recall, you're seeing more of those industrial compatible, commercial compatible requests coming before the Planning Commission and making it to City Council as an alternative to just granting industrial almost everywhere. Because just like the decisions you wrestle with every other commission, it's once you open up the door to one zoning, it's all the other uses in that district. So rather than using just special permits endlessly, we were able to craft these compatible districts, which again, we've used a handful of times now, but are more built on using floor area ratios to reduce the amount of occupancy, to reduce the amount of building coverage on a particular site, which increases safety. So that's why you'll see a lot of warehouses popping up around the airport and ACUS areas, because they don't have very many employees and it's a quote-unquote safer use. And then lastly, the one-line text amendment, which I'll be bringing before the Planning Commission next go-round, is adding a line to when we make determinations and evaluations of rezonings to include the latest adopted ACUS map. So it's not a drastic change. It's just clarifying that the maps are going to be used when making the rezoning calls as far as staff recommendations and something that the commission should consider. These are things that we already do. If you more times than not, we'll see it in the staff report as a specific ACUS section. Regardless of it's in or not, I always call it out. Yes, it's in APZ, or no, it's nowhere near. If it's nowhere near, this is the distance to the nearest APZ zone. I do that, again, for things like noise, to keep in mind that just because you're not in the line doesn't mean you're safe. But that is, in a nutshell, the end of the presentation as far as the ACUS briefing. And again, you're going to see this presentation the next go-round, an even briefer version, because it's just going to highlight the text amendment.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Schrader.
This is just kind of a comment on that. But I do think it is fairly critical, especially when this is one area where the media tends to get involved and look for comment on when we have these cases that deal with this. And I'm not completely sure why, because generally, I mean, I think everything around here has a very favorable working relationship with the military. So, but I am concerned a little bit about using the term safer when we're talking about these things, isn't it? Does the military recommend a different use? I mean, because really what we're talking about is a potential for loss of life. I mean, how catastrophic, if you have an event that you lose an aircraft, what is the potential for loss of life? And in other words, you mentioned warehouses. If you're storing something combustible in that warehouse and it's hit by an aircraft, it's not necessarily a safer situation, it's just potentially lesser catastrophic loss of life. Now, I don't know what appropriate terms you should put those in for that being conveyed to media, but there seems to be the potential for a lot of misconstrued of how those terms are used. I don't know how serious it is, but I do know that the media seems to be engaged in every one of these cases that we have, where anywhere where the AQ zone is potentially touched. And I do think it's sensitive enough that we try to use the appropriate terminology, because it's, you know, every time one of these closure hearings comes up, this stuff is always at the forefront of how close was that area or not. And of course, obviously, anytime there's an aircraft that goes down anywhere in the country, any place that has a military installation gets thrown in with the scrutiny. So,
Absolutely, that's a fair point. Accident potential zones are just that. It's trying to gauge the potentiality of an incident occurring. But those lines are no different than our UTP, which are lines on a map, no different than the Ocean Drive case, that if I stand here, I'm multifamily, but if I walk 10 feet, I'm now single family. The world simply doesn't work that way. The purpose of the zones is to gauge what is a perceived risk of a negative incident occurring from either takeoff or landing. So as you're gaining altitude or as you're coming in, that risk is growing or shrinking that an incident could occur. I think it's a little more dangerous, and I shouldn't say dangerous, but why it's more of a concern in Corpus is because, you know, the Navy likes to call them baby pilots, because these are first-year, second-year trainees. So their reaction time, it's almost like giving a Corvette to a 16-year-old. The reaction time and the skill set simply isn't there yet. They're developing these skills. So that's the danger. And so that's why we take it a little bit more to heart, that it's not just your seasoned pilot that you may have in Kingsville, where they even have incidences there and they have a whole squadron wing. So you're having those experienced pilots, but accidents can still happen. They're not planned, so these areas are just to put folks on alert that you're in an area that has a perceived quote-unquote risk compared to other areas that a certain altitude will be reached. But just as I mentioned, just because you're out of this now, you know, red, blue, orange zone doesn't mean you're safe. An accident can occur anywhere.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well done, Andrew. Thank you.
No problem.
At this time, we will hear the director's report.
No report this evening.
Thank you. Anything else to schedule for the good of the commission? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.